هدايا صاحي كي تستريح وغص الدعاء. بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهله وصحبه ومواله. You guys, as we always do, we're going to begin with a brief review, just 4 to 5 questions. I'm going to fire off, one for each team to get you jump started mentally, get you prepared, get your competitive juices flowing. Here we go. First question, and that goes to Team Abu Bakr. Team Abu Bakr, to the best of your ability, tell me, what is contingent existence and how do we recognize it? This was a new philosophical concept we learned last time. And I hope through your TA sessions you got a chance to kind of solidify it, deepen it a little bit. Team Abu Bakr, help me out with this. What is contingent existence? And how do we recognize it? Ammar is going to take it for Team Abu Bakr. Ammar, go ahead and get us started.
So contingent existence is for something that is limited in its existence. So that could be by like time or space. Another word we used for it was something that's dependent.
Very nice.
And you could look at some factors like its dependency, if it relies on something to exist.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And I think those pretty much cover all of the features of something. I think one more thing you're missing, though, or I mean, you may have mentioned. You mentioned limitation, you mentioned dependency. There's one more thing, and that is specific configuration. That's very, very important. If it's arranged in a in a very specific manner. Remember, we talked about how if the flowers are arranged in a way where it spells "Welcome to Wisconsin," then in that situation, that arrangement cries out for an explanation that it had to be put in that manner as opposed to any other manner. So, but Ammar, by and large, you got the point. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next question. Team Omar, this is for you. Okay, do your best. I hope the TA sessions helped in this regard. To the best of your ability, Team Omar, explain infinite regress to me in your own words, preferably with your own examples. 5, 4, 3, and 2. Okay, Anas is going to take it for Team Omar. Anas, yalla, bismillah. Let's see what you got. Do your best, and hopefully your teammates can fill in the rest.
So if I'm messing up, my team just come in for me, okay? So infinite regress, the best way I can describe it in my own words is something that's infinite, and because it's infinite, it never exists. Basically, like it's so hard to use other examples because you use one of the pretty much the best examples, but I kept using the universe for some reason in class, and even in the review session.
Got it.
But basically, if you just keep going, who created the universe? Big Bang. Who created the Big Bang? Creator. We would never be here,
Gotcha.
So
Very good. So that's a good starting point on us. Now we're getting somewhere. I think I would rephrase your very first statement. If something is infinite, it would not exist. Rather, if something is infinitely dependent on something, then it wouldn't exist. Just kind of tweaking that a little bit for you. Anybody else in Team Omar that can kind of fill in the gaps here or want to add something to it? Let me give an opportunity. Val, what would you say?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. So because if we look at something like an event and ask what caused it, going back an infinite number of times means it would have never have happened. And so by that logic, we can conclude whether something is finite or infinite, or if it would follow the infinite regress or not.
Beautiful. Well stated. Well stated. Half a point for each of you. Thank you so much. And that leads us to the next team. Team Uthman, this is for you. Tell me, why is the question, what's the cause of God, a nonsensical question logically? So once again, the popular question, who designed the designer or who's the cause of God? Why is that a nonsensical question? Demonstrate it. Don't just say it emotionally. Demonstrate it. So let me hear first from Amir, and if there are any gaps there, then Amir can step in. Amir, yalla.
All right. I'm sorry if there's background noise. There's an AC vent shooting. Anyways, first and foremost, it's an illogical question because God is uncreated. Therefore, you can't associate something to something that cannot have that association to begin with. It's an illogical argument to begin with. You can't do it. And B, if we try to answer that, it would continuously lead to an infinite regress, and we'd really never get anywhere.
Dang, well stated, man. Spot on, efficient, To the point. I love it. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so that leads us to the next question, and this is for Team Khadija. Team Khadija, help me out with this question. In your own words, look at the wording of the question. I want you to listen to the question carefully. I don't want you to end up answering the wrong question. In your own words, on the mathematical argument, what is crying out for an explanation? So listen to what I'm asking, right? On the mathematical argument that we went into last time, what is crying out for an explanation? 5 and 4. Yes, Team Khadija. 3 and 2. This is where we're nearing the hashtag steal. If there is someone from the if someone is interested in stealing that. And 1, what is crying out for an explanation? All right, so we're gonna have to give the steal. So what's the first steal I saw? The first steal I saw was Anas. Anas, go ahead. You get the first. You get the first dibs.
You said in the mathematical argument, what is crying out for an explanation?
Yes.
Crying out for an explanation. The thing that is crying out for an explanation is why it was made that way, or what made it become into that form.
But why is it crying out for an explanation, like that explanation? What about it?
It's crying out for that explanation because it had to depend on something in order to be.
How do we know that? So you're almost there, but you're kind of dancing around the bush a little bit. We're gonna have to give to Sister Zainab. Yes, Sister Zainab, what do you have? What's crying out for an explanation?
I guess similarly to Ennis, of like, if it was done so meticulously and like beautifully, especially in nature, when we see all the examples of mathematics in nature, how can that happen just because, like, what it has to have a reason behind it?
Yes, very cool, very cool. So we'll give half a point to Sister Zainab there then for the steal. Here's one more thing I would add to it, and that's the following: the mathematical order in nature. If there's no intelligence behind it, it's very, very difficult to see why it's observing any order at all. Which you would expect, actually, that if there's no mind behind it, you would expect disorder and chaos. But why would nature behave mathematically? Why would gravity be so disciplined to follow a precise order? Like, how does it just fall upon that order? That cries out for an explanation. Okay, so with that in mind, last question is actually very similar to this one. Now it makes me think I should have asked a different question, but chalo, since I have it, I'll ask, and that is, why on atheism a mathematical order is so problematic? So this is not for Team Aisha. 5 and 4. Why on atheism is the mathematical order so problematic? 5, 4. Sister Aina, go ahead. Bismillah.
So because atheists believe that everything came from randomness, there is no explanation for like the precision that comes with like the mathematical nature of nature.
Very good. Or as one video I was watching, they said that every explosion we know creates chaos, but somehow the Big Bang as an explosion created order. How did it fall upon mathematical order? So that leads to a serious philosophical conundrum. Beautiful. You guys, with this in mind, alhamdulillah, Sister Aina, a full point for you. We are going to, inshallah, start our study of today's session. Let me pull it up for y'all. With this, let us begin. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. You guys, welcome to the 4th session of Dismantling Doubts. You guys, let me start off by saying the following. Today's session, hands down, is one of the most important sessions of DD. I hope I don't say that at the beginning of every session, but for real though, this time around, no capping, today's session is insanely critical. Why? Because today you will be awakened to the subtle and overt brainwashing that you and I are subjected to since the day we set foot in the educational system. It's in your textbook. It's in your culturescape. And if you're not aware, and you're just sheepishly taking it all in, this is where you hit a certain phase in your life, and all of a sudden, you're having doubts, and you don't know what to do, and it's creeping up on you, and it blindsides you. So today, in the first half of the class, we'll study this worldview we're fed, often unbeknownst to us. And we're going to learn this worldview. We're going to become familiar with this worldview, and we're going to learn, inshallah, that this right here is the root cause of atheism, y'all. This worldview, unfortunately, has seeped into every facet of our culture, our education, and the name of this worldview is, of course, naturalism, and another name it goes by is scientism. So that will be the first half of the class. In the second half of the class, inshallah, we'll study the third argument for God's existence, one of my favorite arguments, and that is the fine-tuning argument, also known as the argument from design. So with this in mind, inshallah, we need a guidebook coordinator who has not yet gone. I think we've had Anas, you have gone so far. Who else has done the guidebook coordination? I forget. I think it was Sister Zainab. Did you do the guidebook coordination? I think
Sister Aina, I think it was
Sister Aina. Was it Sister Aina? Okay, very cool. Anybody wants to do the guidebook coordination? Preferably somebody who's not in the MVP race, so we can give Sister Nuzhat. So, Sister Nuzhat, let's have you go at it, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so Sister Nuzhat, go ahead and read for us, and let's get started.
Naturalism and scientism. Before we continue our study of the remaining arguments, we need to briefly study the opposition, understand their methods, and examine their assumptions.
Bismillah. Go ahead and read the translation of that ayah for us, Sister Nuzhat. Bismillah.
They know the surface level knowledge of this world, but they are deliberately heedless of anything beyond the hereafter. How can this man promise you that after you die and become dust and bones, you will be brought out alive? How ridiculous is that? There is nothing beyond our worldly life. We die, we live, and that's it. We will not be resurrected.
Very cool. You guys, this ayah captures the worldview that you and I are about to study right now. Okay, so let us officially begin with the introduction to this worldview. I'm going to shift to my next slide right here. And oh, by the way, before I dive into naturalism, I hope, and I'm a big fan and I'm a big believer in this, that our students should always know where we are in the course. You should know how much progress we have made and how much progress is left. You guys, if you remember, we started this course with the objective of studying 6 pillars of Iman, where we said Iman is Iman is where you learn to trust. And we said that was a rational human exercise because trust, majority of human knowledge is trust-based. And specifically, we said the objective of this course was that we're going to study the 6 mega claims of the unseen that we as Muslims make. And we're going to go through each of these pillars. We're going to study what we believe and why is it reasonable to hold those beliefs. So we started with the first pillar, which is going to take half the course, and that is belief in Allah. Already we have studied what we specifically believe as Muslims, as Muslims as opposed to other religions. That part is done, and then we have also, alhamdulillah, started to venture into why is it reasonable to hold those beliefs. So far we have done the kalam argument and the mathematical argument. And today, inshallah, we're going to start the third one. But before we do, we're going to go on a little tangent and study the opposition. You know what they say? Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. So we got to learn a little bit about naturalism today, folks. Let us begin. What is naturalism? You guys, I'm amazed at how many Muslims don't know about naturalism. We're all worried about atheism, though. But yo, naturalism is where it starts. This is the root cause. Atheism is just a little symptom. It's the sniffle. The actual illness is naturalism. You dismantle naturalism, atheism slowly falls apart. So, with this in mind, go ahead and get the following in your notes. You guys, naturalism is the worldview that the physical world is the only reality. That matter and energy is all there is ultimately. And I want you to take a moment and appreciate just how tall this claim is. That for them, for a naturalist, matter is the starting and the ending point of all existence. It is al-awwal and akhir for them. So that's the first thing you want to get down in the definition. Second thing you want to get down in your definition. They go on to say nature, which by the way is another word they use for a material, physical reality. They say nature is all there is, hence there is no room for supernatural. Understand this very clearly. I like to use the following phrasing to describe naturalism. A naturalist will say anything beyond the physical realm either doesn't exist or doesn't matter. Matter is what matters. Let me say that again. Matter is what matters on naturalism. It's the alpha and omega of it all. So here's my first question, and this goes to Team Abu Bakr. Team Abu Bakr, help me out with this. On this worldview then, what is denied right off the bat? There are multiple things I'm looking for that are denied right off the bat from the get-go. on this worldview, specifically from a religious point of view? What are things that a naturalist would automatically deny? Team Abu Bakr, 5, 4. Amar, go ahead, take it for us. What would be denied?
So right off or after that, basically anything that is unseen that we believe in. So like basically all of the, okay, not all of them, but
Yeah.
things that we believe are like in a
Let's list them,
different
Amar. So
reality.
number 1 on the list.
So I would say God, Allah, because that he's
Yes.
someone that no human has seen. Jinn, angels,
Hereafter,
yeah,
souls, and also miracles. All of that is immediately denied from the get-go because there's no place for it on a naturalistic worldview. They are closed off from the get-go, and this is why, you guys, it's difficult to talk to a naturalist, because they're not even open-minded to looking at compelling evidence in a neutral way, because it's not just a position at stake, it's their entire worldview at stake. And then they go on to say, here's another thing to put into your notes: everything must eventually be explained in terms of physical matter, atoms, energy, and natural physical causes. Everything has a physical, in fact, let me rephrase that. Everything can only have a physical explanation. There is no need for a metaphysical, supernatural explanation. Team Omar, help me out with this next question. I'm going to put up a phrase. You guys decipher this for me. On naturalism, they say matter comes before mind. What do they mean by that? One more time. Matter comes before mind. Team Omar, 5 and 4. Mason, help us out. What do they mean by that?
So I would say matter comes before mind. What they're trying to say is that like everything that you want, everything that you desire, all your instincts, all your drives derives from some sort of physical input. So things like morality, things like your personality all comes from basically your situation and what the universe, I guess, wants you to do in order to best survive or best adapt to your environment.
Very good, Mason. You're almost there, and I think we'll just give you the point for it. I have a slightly different wording. Here's what I have. You know how Bible starts out, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, naturalist Bible would start like this: in the beginning, there was matter. And eventually, through physics and evolution and laws of cause and effect, minds like the human beings arose. So matter was first, and eventually it gave rise to minds like ours. Now, that leads me to the question for Team Uthman. Take these words, matters come before mind, and can you rearrange it for me on the theistic worldview, please? Or on a Muslim worldview, please? You can only use these words. Rearrange them for me and explain them for me. On theism, how would you rearrange those words to reflect our worldview? 5, 4, 3, and 2. Amir, go ahead. Bismillah. What do you got? Yeah, I think, Amir, you may be on mute, buddy. Okay, so I don't think we can unfortunately, hear you, Amir. Amir, go ahead. You take a crack at it.
So for a theist, it would be mind comes before matter, as in there's mind designing the matter that comes into existence.
And who would be that mind?
God,
exactly. So you guys notice these are two diametrically opposed worldviews. On one worldview, matter comes first, and then mind kind of grows out of it, or emerges out of it. On the other one, no, there was a divine mind that gave rise to matter. Now, with this in mind, final thing you want to put into your notes: scientific method and physical verification is the only way to the truth for a naturalist. Science is the only way. Physical verification is the only way to the truth. Everything else is off the table. All right, so with this in mind, you guys, let us test your understanding, shall we? I'm going to put up 2 scenarios. Y'all tell me how a naturalist would react right off the bat. So, Team Khadija, this first scenario is for you. So, a naturalist comes across the fact that multiple eyewitnesses reported food and water being multiplied at the hands of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or blind being healed at the hands of Jesus. How would a naturalist react? How would they explain this particular historical report? 5, 4, what would they be forced to conclude is, I guess, what I'm asking for. I want you to put yourself in the shoe of a naturalist and try to come up with how would they conclude, how would they interpret this historical report. 5, 4, 3, and 2, and 1. All right, shift. Oh, Sister Fatma coming in clutch. Bismillah, go ahead.
So I think like they would deny it because like they would say like it goes like laws of nature, and also I was gonna say, sorry.
Well, so you're right, they would deny it for sure, but how would they explain it away then? I mean, you got to come up with some way to explain it, yeah? And how would they explain it away? There are typical answers that they always give. What would it sound like?
Is it like they would deny it? Would they try to explain it with their own like argument?
Yeah, they would try to explain it in natural terms. And how would they have to explain it in natural terms? So let's just see. Let's hear from Jaluddin. How would they explain it in natural terms?
They would
Physical terms.
They would say that this is not physically or scientifically possible.
Therefore,
and therefore it's a man-made story.
Okay, very good. So one is it's a man-made story. That would be the first potential explanation. It's a hoax. Or even if it was true, the people were all colluding to lie. Or the people were mistaken. Or it was a mass hysteria. They have to come up with some explanation to explain it away because there's just no place for it on their worldview. It's kind of like wearing certain types of glasses. It makes certain things blurry. On a naturalistic worldview, everything supernatural is just blurry, off limits, completely out of bounds. Here's another scenario for y'all. And that is a naturalist comes across, and this is for Team Aisha, a naturalist comes across the fact that Quran has stories and information about the people of the past that the Prophet simply had no access to. He was illiterate in the middle of the desert. How did he know about Joseph and Jacob? How did he know about what happened to stories that only you would know if you lived in a civilized part of the world? Or the fact, so many other facts that are mentioned in the Quran about historical accounts, they would have, how would they explain that? Sister Zainab, go ahead, take a crack at it.
I feel like they would claim it to be that it was like the Quran was written later than anyone was thinking.
Okay, very good.
A lie, and that, you know, like that somebody did go and do research and wrote it and kind of put all the information together.
So now that claim is hard to make because we have manuscripts that go back to the 1st century. So let's say I gave you that fact. Now they have to come up with another explanation. Now what would they say?
That it was all coincidence and they got really lucky just making stuff up.
Well, but that's a hard one to sell. So you know what they say, right? They say, oh, Muhammad plagiarized it from the people of the book. Yeah. So they're forced to read in plagiarism. So then we come back to them. They're like, yeah, but he has no historical record of being known as a liar. He has no criminal history at all. So they say, well, he deceived everybody.
If he plagiarized it from a different book, then they have to then be saying that the other book was real.
Well, yeah, and that leads to other problem because we don't know any Arabic Bible that was available in the Arabic language prior to the 8th century, and the Prophet passed away in the 6th century. So there are a host of problems, but they have to latch on to something because you need to find a natural cause. You have to be a force. You are forced to read in because, once again, I'm trying to just help you all understand there's no room for anything beyond a physical, natural explanation. So your explanations will naturally be, well, play on words, naturally be skewed and biased from the get-go. Okay, that's naturalism for you in action. With this in mind, you guys, we are ready to move on. We're not dismantling naturalism yet. We're going to get there, inshallah. But for now, I just want you to understand the worldview. Here we go. Sister Nuzhat, please go ahead and read what it says on the slide here.
This worldview can be traced back to the city of Ionia in Greece. It was famously championed by the philosopher Epicurus.
Very good, very good. You guys, this worldview, like most worldviews, they start in Greece at the time of Aristotle and Plato. Okay, now you guys Muslims, pay attention to this because this is so profound. We got to get this down because we got to learn from history. Do you know why this worldview of naturalism started in Greece? Because Greeks at that time were steeped in paganism. Rampant paganism, out of control mythology, supernatural explanations for everything. They had a deity for lightning. They had a deity for rain, for waves. They were so extreme so extravagant on the supernatural side of things that it produced a counter reaction. One extreme breeds another. Let me say that again. One extreme breeds another. My teacher always says one extreme breeds another. A breed of radical philosophers now emerged. Now they're on the scene and they were opposed to anything supernatural. The pendulum swung to the other side. They were opposed to anything metaphysical. Metaphysical means beyond the physical, by the way. Muslims, what's the lesson in it for us? That's the question I want to ask, and this is open to the entire class. Drop a hashtag if you can relate to what I'm getting to. When a culture becomes this knee-deep in superstitions and supernatural and becomes so extravagant that it produces the counter-reaction, what's the lesson for us in our own cultures, in our own societies? I get worried about Muslim societies in light of this historical fact. What am I getting at? Sister Zainab says, stay in the middle lane. Very good. But there's a phenomenon I'm hoping someone can comment on that exists in our own cultures that should make us worried in light of what happened in Greece. Mason, what do you got?
I was going to say, it's like it's constantly dynamic. There's no stability. It's just a cycle of reactions and counter reactions and counter reactions. So you can't really build anything off of that.
That's true. That's true. But so let me, okay, so that's one angle that you can potentially take. There's another angle, y'all. There's another angle. If you have lived in a Muslim society, folks, tell me, have you not seen crazy indulgence in superstitious behavior? Amulets and rings and crazy rituals to protect you against jealousy. I was told you can't cut your nails on Wednesday. I know Muslims who do grave worship. I was told growing up in Pakistan that if you move your scissors for no reason, it's gonna create fights in the house. Are there other cultural, weird, superstitious things that you have been exposed to? This is the direction where someone has a mental illness and the first thing we say is jinn. First thing we chalk it up to is like possession. Yeah. Thank you very much. Now you guys are starting to relate. When a culture becomes this steeped in supernatural, superstitious, hocus pocus type of stuff, understand is going to produce a counter reaction where you're going to bring about a group of people who don't want to have anything to do with anything beyond the physical. And now all of a sudden, even if Quran talks about angels, they'll be like, yeah, but maybe angels just refers to really good people, as one of the scholars did. So we want to be very, very careful here. Yeah, so black cats crossing our path. Yeah, walking under a ladder. All sorts of ajib types of beliefs just prop up. We ask Allah's protection. You guys, with this in mind, we move on to the next thing I want you guys to write down. Sister Nuzhat, go ahead.
In the 16th and 17th century, a light version of naturalism was adopted in Europe.
You guys, so this is another very important thing to get down if you want to understand naturalism. How does it influence us today? Well, in the 16th and the 17th century, understand Europe was allergic to religion. All right, it's a question to the entire class. Why was Europe becoming allergic to religion? If you know your history from the 16th and the 17th century, you should be able to tell me. There's just one word answer or two word answer. Why was Europe becoming so allergic and tired of religion in the 16th and the 17th century? Anybody knows? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just type it right in. Not taxes necessarily. The religious wars. Religious wars. Sister Nuzhat, you're close. We're going to give you half a point. Religious wars. You guys, your religious people were at each other's throats. Thousands upon thousands dying. Calvinists are fighting the Catholics. Catholics are fighting the Protestants. And they are just recovering from the Dark Ages. And also, you're right, the Roman Catholic Church, their corruption was exposed as well. So that also discredited elements of religiosity in Europe. And what had started to happen, here's another thing, at that time, in the 16th century and the 17th century, when religious people are acting in this embarrassing manner, the works of Epicurus, remember Epicurus we just talked about? Works of Epicurus and Lucretius, these are naturalists, materialist philosophers. Their writings are being discovered all over again. Printing press is now available, so these works are distributed in mass to the public, and now European intellectuals slowly began to embrace naturalism, but a light version of naturalism. This is where they're not denying the supernatural. They're all believers in God, and we know, and I shared with you earlier, some of the greatest scientists in this time are avid believers in God. But here's a light version of naturalism. They said that when we do science, we're not going to be lazy and invoke God as an explanation for everything and case closed. No, we're going to look for physical, natural causes. So if we're studying rain, we're not going to just say, oh, it's God and his angels. Our work here is done. Hallelujah, let's go home. No, 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 no. We're going to study the natural, physical causes so we can understand matter and manipulate it to our advantage. Muslims, I have a question for you, and this is to the entire class. Do Muslims have a problem with light naturalism? Yes or no? Do we have a problem with light naturalism that I just described? That when we're doing science, we're going to put naturalism aside, we're going to put a supernatural aside for a bit, and we're going to try to investigate the physical causes. Okay, a lot of you are saying no. Can someone justify it for me? Because we don't want to just sound like we're like trying to sound sophisticated and palatable to modern understandings. Someone justify that for me. Rafi, how would you justify it?
I would say like it's okay to find the scientific explanations as long as you don't pass the extreme of saying that's the only explanation and that you're not saying, oh, God's not, there. And
very good, very good. Okay, we're gonna give you half a point, but I want someone to give me like textual evidence, if you can, that in our deen it's okay to look for physical causes of things, and it's okay if you're not, tying everything up to the supernatural, even though ultimately we know Allah is the creator of the whole show. So let me hear from Amir. Amir, what do you got? And then Amir, maybe.
What I was going to say was sometimes we can rely on scientific facts in terms of the ayah that brings in how being came into creation, from the clot to the to the and then it goes on and forth, and it scientifically explains it, and we believe it, and then science comes on and proves it, and we believe it. And then some things, on the other hand, that's like the naturalism that we believe in. As long as there's like palatable scientific method and discovery behind it, sure, we'll take it. But sometimes you just can't. So for example, when we ask about the soul, يسألونك عن الروح. It's from God. We have no explanation for it. We can't look into it. So that's the side of naturalism that we would never believe in.
Makes sense.
Explanation.
Very cool, very cool. So you guys, here we go. Now, I don't have this on my PowerPoint, so you're gonna have to just write this down. You guys, the reason Muslims don't have a problem with light naturalism, as Amir described, is because we have always had the concept of asbab. Asbab means physical means. You guys, our scholars from the beginning of the Islamic tradition have called this world Darul Asbab, the domain of physical causes and effects. Why? Because Quran itself tells you, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ. Go travel, venture out into the land and study, investigate how God began the act of creation. Study the physical mechanisms, the meticulous planning that will actually point you to God and the agent behind it all. Here's another evidence as to why we don't have a problem with light naturalism. Our Prophet ﷺ, when he migrated from Mecca to Medina, do you understand the meticulous planning and scheming he engaged in? He didn't just put his hands in the air and said, well, guess what? Jibril's gonna come and we're gonna teleport from Mecca to Medina. God's got my back. When the companions of the Prophet were sick, the Prophet told them to go see a physician. He prescribed farming techniques to them, telling us all that this world, sunnah of Allah in this world is that it is made on the blueprint of physical causation. That things have physical systems and causes that you can investigate. What does Allah say in the Quran? وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ هُوَ الَّذِي سَخَّرَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He has subjugated things for you, all of it. How is he subjugated? Because he has tied it to regularities and physical causations that you and I can study. But there's one disclaimer we add though, y'all. As Muslims, when we're studying nature, here's a disclaimer we add, and that is causes do not produce effects without Allah's permission. That's one thing that separates us from others. That God can step in and at any time and can veto the system of cause and effect. That he can do. He's not shackled by the system that he creates. And that's what happened to Abraham when he was thrown in the fire. The very creator who gave fire the ability to burn and produce heat He was able to veto that. He was able to cancel that. And that's what a miracle is. So understand, light naturalism, we have no problem with, because Allah created the world on regularities and patterns and causations. But here's where things get problematic. In the 19th and the 20th century, a more militant naturalism took hold of Europe, becoming the dominant worldview, and from there it exported to the rest of the world. You guys, and we suffer the consequences of that today. Listen to me, y'all, very carefully. We as Muslims need to know this. In the 18th and the 19th century, a more dark, a more crass, a more arrogant and aggressive form of naturalism developed, where they're not just putting supernatural respectfully aside to study science. No, they began to deny the supernatural altogether. They began to ridicule, satire, mock the supernatural or any supernatural claim, to a point that at the onset of the 20th century, Friedrich Nietzsche, the famous German philosopher, declared the death of God, commenting on the fact that Europe has been swept by naturalism and secularism. So, this is a little bit of history of naturalism for you and what it entails and what it believes. Now, you guys, with this in mind, I need to tell you one more thing about naturalism, inshallah, and then we are ready to slowly dismantle it, inshallah. You guys, naturalism, and this should be the next thing on your. Go ahead, Sister Nuzat, prompt us from your guidebook.
The grand story of naturalism.
Naturalism has its own origin story of why is there something rather than nothing. This is the big question of life. Why is there something rather than nothing? Well, naturalism has to have its own story. So this is the grand story of naturalism. Try to get as much of it down in your notes as possible. Don't get lost in the sauce too much. I'm going to send you the slides if I need to, and I usually do. So capture some brief notes, capture their grand story, because it's going to really help you understand what naturalism is all about. So here we go. Grand story of naturalism. All of reality, time, space, and matter arose from some version of the Big Bang. This is where the naturalist story starts. And then from there, undirected physical forces caused the universe to expand, leading to the formation of stars and galaxies and the entire periodic table. I'm going to just do the overcast narrative. You guys can keep writing it down. On at least one of these stars, called the Earth, non-living chemicals and amino acids began interacting in water spontaneously. Hopefully that's starting to sound familiar. These chance interactions produced complex proteins, eventually leading to the formation of the first living cell. From their evolution and natural selection, through random gene mutations, gave rise to all the life forms we see, including the human beings. All right, folks. Hopefully someone's paying attention to the highlights here. Timo Booker, tell me, why have I highlighted certain words in brown over others? What am I trying to highlight here? I'm trying to highlight a theme that seeps through the entire naturalist story here. What is that theme? 5, 4. Let me see. 3. And 2. Amar, okay, let's have Rafa here, and then we'll go to Amar. Go ahead.
They try to make their story sound like really like scientific and, you know, like really big with all the words, but then they'll use things like undirected and spontaneous that don't have any explanation. They don't have any explanation of like why it occurred or at that moment. And so there's holes in their stories.
Yes, very good. Notice these words are specifically. Amar, what do you have? Let me hear from you.
I was going to say they're trying to eliminate the possibility of an intelligent creator behind all this. They're, like,
very good. This is exactly the way I had it. These words are not just placeholders, y'all. They're specifically there to remove an agent, an intelligent agent. That's why undirected is there, spontaneous is there, chance is there. And tell me, isn't this the story you're spoon-fed at school? If not in those explicit terms, that's what natural sciences are all about. And here we go. The last one. The complexity found in different organisms is due to struggle for survival, where the fittest get to reproduce. And things and features that are conducive to survival make the cut into the next version of things, and those that don't die off. And this is how organs are produced. This is how complexity is produced. This is how any feature shows up on the planet. Yeah. So you guys take some seconds and get this down into your notes, inshallah. I'll leave the slide up and make sure that you guys are able to get this down. This is the grand story of naturalism in a nutshell. So, hopefully you guys are able to get majority of this down, if not word for word, but at least the key ideas behind their story. And I want you to appreciate one more thing. Grand story of naturalism has two pillars. One is evolution, which is the last part, and the other is physics, the standard understanding of physics. Both of these are the key. Both of these are cornerstones of their origin story. With this in mind, inshallah, you guys, we are now ready to move on. This is where I need y'all's help. So, Team Abu Bakr, I already asked you a question. We're going to start with Team Umar here. You guys, now that you understand naturalism, let us test our understanding of naturalism in action. I'm going to put up a subject. You guys, to the best of your ability, tell me, how would naturalism influence the study of that very subject? Team Umar, we're going to start with you. Take a crack at it. Study of history. A naturalist will approach history way more differently than we would. How would naturalism influence their study of history? Let me hear from Team Umar here. 5 and 4 and 3 and 2. How would naturalism influence your study of history? 3 and 2 and 1. Okay, here we go. So we have two people. Anas, let's start with you. How would naturalism influence your study of history?
So they keep trying. What I notice is they keep trying to remove that higher power, and also they keep trying to make things as like natural as possible.
Yes.
So that the way they would
approach
impact
history.
Approach history is by saying that it was just nonsensical, or randomly saying that it was or you could put it this way, that it was just like, you know, the game telephone, where you kind of just say something in somebody's ear. That's how history.
I see what you're saying. But then that would mean that they would have to throw shade in history, period, as an overall subject. Like they would never take history seriously. But we know naturalists don't just rely. They don't discredit history in its entirety. Val, how would this influence their study of history?
Well, I suppose to piggyback off of Ennis is that a lot of history relied on the influence of religion, and so to dismiss religion would, like you said, be dismissing history in the majority. Even if you go back, beyond like the civilization of humans and whatnot, trying to, like we've discussed before about like the origins of everything, that kind of history would also be very not really effective to say, oh, it just randomly happened. Right? That's just not convincing at all.
So I hope everybody understands naturalists are not history deniers. But here's how their view of history is influenced. They see history as an interplay of natural causes caused by man or nature. There's no room for divine intervention. There is no room for revelation. There can be no history of prophets. That's all a lie by default from the get-go, and there definitely can never be miracles. That's where Anas, they would invoke the whole phone thing, the phone game thing. Anytime there's a account of something that goes against their worldview, they'll be like, yeah, but it must be a lie. It must be a hoax. Must be a fabrication. So that's how their view of history is influenced, where they will only look at history through physical causes. And that's how history is studied today in the universities. Like Bara said, and Bara will give you half a point for this, they will only look at physical primary sources like arrowheads or manuscripts. And inshallah, we'll study that more in depth, inshallah, when we get to the second pillar. So here we go. Let's go on to the second thing. Study of psychology. Oh yes. Team Rahman, help me out. How would a naturalist study psychology? 5 and 4 and 3. Jalaluddin, what do you think? How would a naturalist study psychology?
So they would study it as an evolution-based subject. Like,
okay, very cool.
Like we evolved, and that's their justification for it.
Very good. Your mental features are all evolved. Very good. So that's definitely one thing. Anything else someone wants to add here? 5, 4, 3, 2. Sister Zainab, what do you think? What do you want to add to this?
Sorry, one second.
No problem.
That they would say that it's all based off of like chemicals in your brain and dopamine and serotonin and any thought that you think can be, explained by chemicals and stuff like that.
Genes and environments. Very cool. Homo sapiens are like any other organism where our self-interested personalities and behavior is determined by our genes, environment, and our physical makeup. No soul, no free will is just an illusion. So, with this in mind, we move on to the next subject, study of morality. Oh man. Let me see here. Team Khadija, any idea how their study of morality? Actually, I'm just going to give you guys this one and then inshallah, just for the sake of time, their study of morality is very interesting. There are no ultimate standards of good and evil. Morality is a human construct wired by evolution as an aid for survival. So that's why on a naturalist study of morality, there are so many theories of ethics. Utilitarian theory and Kant's theory and deontology, and there's so many theories of ethics because there are no ultimate standards of right and wrong. So now everybody is trying to devise their own theory of morality, and this is something you're going to study if you go into business. You're going to study business ethics, multiple theories of ethics. And here we go. Study of psychology, sociology. So how is there a study of sociology influence? Very similar to the natural world. The natural world and the social world are roughly identical, governed by similar principles. And then, last but not least, this is very interesting. I open this up to Team Khadija or Team Aisha. Either one of you can answer. How does that influence their study of theology? Man, this is happening in universities now, folks, and we gotta be awakened to this reality. 5. Sister Maram, what do you think? How does study of theology go on naturalism?
I don't think the study of theology would exist. I think
your voice is very low, sorry.
Sorry, is this better?
This is better, yes.
Okay. I don't think the study of theology would exist. I think it would kind of slowly be struck from like the curriculum until they would be able to like discredit every part of it.
Yes, very cool. You're very close. Here, I'm going to give you a little different garb. Theology is a history of religion now. They study religion as a historical study, where religion is treated as a social, cultural phenomenon, which humans develop to foster unity, community, and hope in hard times. Like culture, there's nothing true about it. Like biryani, there's nothing true about biryani. It's just a human thing that we kind of came up with. Religion is the same way. It's a social construction that we came up with, and that's what religion is treated as on naturalism. Please understand that this is the curriculum in most universities. That's why I'm going through the trouble and taking the time to go through this, y'all. So, with this in mind, we are, alhamdulillah, ready to now finally get into arguments against naturalism. You guys, now that we understand this worldview, it's time to study its weaknesses. Naturalism is great for studying science, but it's a terrible worldview, as you and I are going to learn in a second. In a sense, the entire course is an argument against naturalism, but allow me to give you 4 specific ones here so we can see how unnatural naturalism is. Yeah? Here we go. So let's begin with the first argument, and this is how I like to word it, self-refuting assumption. You guys, this is the first argument against naturalism. What we mean by the fact that naturalism is self-refuting, which is the first argument, and we'll go into it right now. What we mean that naturalism is self-refuting is that their worldview contradicts itself. Now, you guys, this is a very sophisticated argument, so let me introduce some terms to you. So if you guys can do me a gigantic favor and bring up your chat boxes so you guys are dialed in with me fully through and through, because this one is a little technical, but it's a phenomenal argument. So we're making a claim. We're making the argument that naturalism refutes itself. How? Well, let me introduce some concepts. First of all, what is a self-refuting claim? A self-refuting claim is something that contradicts itself, hence it collapses, internally implodes. So, I'm going to put up an example, and y'all tell me, why is this claim self-refuting? Here we go, ready? The longest sentence in the English language is 3 words long. Now, why is this a self-refuting claim, folks? Very good, Mason. MashaAllah, got to it right away. The sentence itself is longer than 3 words. So the very length of the sentence contradicts the claim. Understood? Okay, here's another one. This one is a little tricky. Let's see who can get to this one. My mind is unreliable. Now, why is this a self-refuting claim? 5. Your very mind made that statement. You use your mind to determine that your mind is unreliable. Very good. Or as I like to say, it takes a reliable mind to know that something is unreliable. So if you understood this, you guys, now you know what a self-refuting claim is. Yeah? Let me introduce to you another concept. You guys, there are two types of claims: physical versus metaphysical. Simply, physical claim is something that you can physically verify. Like you can scientifically study, you can put it under a microscope or a telescope. Metaphysical claims, you can't do that. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples right now. You guys just pull up your chat boxes, and as many people as possible, even if like 20 people say physical, 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 metaphysical, 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 whatever, as many people we can engage as possible. I'm going to put up a statement. You tell me, physical or metaphysical. You're going to notice all statements are true. Whether you're a theist or an atheist, all these statements are true. You're going to see in a second. But I would just want you to categorize physical or metaphysical. Here we go. Here's the first one. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Physical or metaphysical? Okay, very good. Why physical? Because you can physically study it. Put it under a microscope, study it in a lab, in a test tube, and you can get to the truth. Very good. All right, here we go. Next example. Temperatures of the planet are rising. Physical or metaphysical? Very good. You can physically verify it. If you have the expertise, of course. All right, so here we go. Third example. Seeking knowledge is a virtuous act. Metaphysical. Very good. Very good. You guys are starting to get a hang of it. Notice, because it's a statement of value. It's not describing some physical reality that you can put and take it to a test lab. Okay, here's another one for y'all. Life expectancy in the US is rising. Physical or metaphysical? 4 answers came through. What about the rest of y'all? Physical or metaphysical? Hopefully most of you will say physical, because this is something you can look at the data. You have the death rates right there, and you can basically see it because the hospitals documented. Obviously, you may have to rely on someone's testimony. True. So, Bara, maybe that's why you said meta. You have to rely on someone's testimony, but ultimately, these are physically verifiable facts. Okay. So, with this in mind, let's go to the next one. A person should respect their parents. Metaphysical. Very good. It's a statement of ethics, values. Okay. How about this one? It's one of my favorites. Pursuit of justice is worth the struggle. Definitely metaphysical. Last one. Truth alone shall set you free. That's another metaphysical statement. Okay, you guys, now that you are, alhamdulillah, experts, local experts on physical and metaphysical statements, tell me now, folks. Now let's bring it all together, shall we? Let's evaluate now the following statement. I need you to tell me, is physical or metaphysical? Science is the only way to the truth. Physical or metaphysical? That's a metaphysical claim. Can someone connect the dots for me? Are you able to see what am I getting at? Why this is a self-refuting claim? Science is the only way to the truth. In other words, physical verification is the only way to the truth, but this very statement cannot be physically verified. It's not something you can put under a microscope. So on your own standard, this statement cannot be accepted because you only accept physical claims. So if this statement is true, it's false. That's the irony of this statement. If this statement is taken to be true, that yes, physical verification, science is the only way to the truth, then this very statement on that standard would have to be false. Yeah. What truth are we talking about? Sister Fatima says, truth of understanding reality. Ethics, morality. I mean, all truths. Some truth here, by the way, no naturalist will limit the truth just to like physical facts that we describe. But even, I mean, they have to use physical verification for everything, and that's where they get in trouble with metaphysical issues. So science is the only way to the truth. This very statement is a metaphysical statement, and that's contradictory to their worldview because it cannot be accepted on it. So this is the first thing that you guys want to write down. This is what I mean by the fact that it's self-refuting. Here's another reason why it's self-refuting, you guys. Very, very important to understand this. Science, by definition, only deals with the seen. So how can it possibly know anything about the unseen? How can you make any knowledge claim about the unseen when you have no way of even looking at it? Look, let me elaborate on this so you guys fully understand what I'm saying. A naturalist makes a knowledge claim that there is nothing beyond the physical at all. But science, by definition, can only authoritatively speak about the seen. How can you then deny the very possibility of the unseen? That's like saying that since we haven't observed any aliens, there can never be any aliens. Because we've only observed white swans, there can never be a black one. Which is exactly what they're saying. Look at the parallelism. Since we've only seen the physical world, there can never be beyond the physical world. But our circle of what is seen is so limited. And it's expanding every day. Like every generation of humanity, you guys, brings more of the unseen into the seen, like bacteria and black holes and subatomic particles. Every generation sees more than the previous generation has. So then how could you be so close-minded about the unseen? That's like a child saying, womb is the only reality. Anything beyond the womb either doesn't exist or doesn't matter. Well, it's frankly naive and childish and honestly quite arrogant to limit reality to just what you can observe at a moment in time. Your knowledge is constantly increasing. That's like someone stuck on an island, refusing the possibility of the world beyond. Like, on what ground is that justified? And then finally, I'm going to say one more thing, and then inshallah, I'm going to take y'all's statements. You guys, honestly, the only way a naturalist can hold a view that there's nothing beyond the physical world is on faith. I mean, that's the irony of it. It's only on faith that you believe that there's nothing beyond the physical world, which is contradictory, because the only view you should be holding is the one that you can physically verify, and you can't verify that there's no unseen world. Understand the irony? This is why naturalism is self-refuting. Okay, let me take y'all's questions or comments. If you have any questions based on what I said so far, please go ahead and ask. If that's what they truly believe, why would we continue space exploration or deep sea studies? Because if we can't see it, why keep searching deeper? Yeah, their truth keeps changing like science based on new data. Yeah, we're gonna look at examples of that in a second, inshallah, to study the limits of science and putting science in its place, inshallah. We're gonna get to that in a second. Any questions so far, folks, before we move on to another argument against naturalism? Okay, Sister Fatima, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if the naturalists want like use the physical means to explain everything. Why
Yeah.
can't they use like the physical signs in this world to explain the existence of God, you know?
Very good, because they refuse to make the inference to anything beyond the physical. Well, that's the whole problem with them, right? They're like, we're going to use physical signs for physical stuff. God is beyond physical, so he can't exist. Does that make sense? That's the wickedness of the worldview, that they're closed off, closed-minded to anything beyond. So did things just begin existence upon scientific discovery? Well, yeah, well, see, what will be really problematic for them is when we get to the question of origin. Because we know matter began to exist at a certain point in time. And you know you can't invoke now a material explanation for the beginning of matter, which is the beginning of the universe. Because it's matter that came to existence in the first place. It's matter that needs explaining in the first place. That's when it gets really tricky for them, because you're trying to explain the physical reality, but physical reality itself began at a certain point in time. Now you can't invoke a physical explanation because there's no physics yet. So this is where a naturalist really gets, they start tripping on their own schemes. Okay, here we go. Here's my next argument, which I think is so profound, y'all. Here we go. The argument goes like this. Sister Nuzhat, go ahead and read that for us.
Undermines our confidence in the human cognitive faculties or mind.
Honestly, what I gave above should be enough, but inshallah, let's go ham, shall we, when it comes to naturalism. Here we go. Here's the second argument, that naturalism undermines our confidence in the human cognitive faculties. Now, what I mean by cognitive faculties is a fancy word. Let me just break it down. Cognitive faculties is a phrase for all of our mental processes, from perceiving, learning, understanding, forming beliefs, analyzing. aka the mind. Yeah, so that's what cognitive faculties are. So, on this argument, what we're saying is that naturalism undermines our confidence in the human mind because on naturalism, your mind is a result of random trial and error of nature. Is the product of blind, unguided processes of nature that produce your brain. It's not a product of an intelligent designer. Here's a comedic way of understanding it, y'all. I have a little clip for y'all. So let's see if we can quickly play this. Come on. Let's see here. Why is this not playing? Oh, I know why. Enable content. Here we go. There we go. Bismillah. This is so awesome.
The status of thought in the atheist worldview is very questionable. I mean, sometimes I have fun with my colleagues in Oxford and I say, what do you do science with? And they say, I've got a machine worth $1 billion. I said, I don't mean that, I mean this. Oh, you mean my, and they nearly say mind, and then they remember that there's no mind, there's just a brain. And so they say, I do it with my brain. I say, tell me about your brain. Do you want the long story? No, the short story. Okay, then the short story is, my brain is the end product of a mindless, unguided process. And I say to them, and you trust it? No.
Okay, that's basically the point that we're making here. On naturalism, it undermines your confidence in the human faculties because it's the end product of blind processes of nature. Here's something even more disturbing, y'all. So first of all, go ahead and get this into your notes if you don't already have it. Human brain is the end product of undirected, mindless forces. So how much can you really trust it? And here it gets even more disturbing. Here we go. Why does it get more disturbing? Because on naturalism, our cognitive faculties are shaped by evolution for survival, not truth. Once again, let me give an example. Let me say that again. On naturalism, our cognitive faculties, our minds are shaped by evolution for survival, not truth. That means your mind is biased towards beliefs which promote survival, even if they are not necessarily true. Now, to wrap your head around this a little bit, can someone give me an example to the best of your ability? Can you give me an example where you can have a false belief which promotes survival? Can you think of an example of a false belief that promotes survival? Sister Aina, what do you think?
So like, let's say that all the people in the jungle, like they believe that all the red fruits were poisonous. So they avoid all these red fruits. They never die because they never eat them, but they're not poisonous, right? Like strawberries are not poisonous and apples are not poisonous, but they survived because they had this false belief, but it's still a false belief because not all red
Yes.
fruits.
Very good. Very good example, Sister Aina. Half a point for you. I love the flat earth example, Sister Zainab. Can you elaborate on that? Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Well, I think isn't the idea like I mean, and I don't know about the current flat earth stuff, but the idea of like where a flat earth and there's like the edge of the earth, and so you don't go to the edge of the earth or else you're gonna die. And so
Yes.
people don't like travel and go anywhere, and hence they don't, nothing bad happens to them. So they're like, well, we didn't, nothing bad because we didn't go to the edge of the earth. Even
Very
though it
good.
doesn't exist.
And back in the days, that was especially helpful to survival because otherwise you'll end up in foreign lands, foreign tribes, bandits, highway robbers that could really kill you. So it definitely promotes survival. So, oh, by the way, you guys might think I am strawmanning naturalism by saying that on naturalism, our cognitive faculties are shaped by evolution for survival, not truth. This is not me saying this, by the way. Look at this. Look at what their top naturalist authorities say. Steven Pinker, world-renowned naturalist, cognitive psychologist. Sister Nusrat, read this for us. What does he say?
It says, our brains are shaped for fitness, not for truth. Sometimes the truth is adaptive, but sometimes it is not.
Very cool. Very cool. Here we go. Here's another one, just so you guys have multiple authorities on this. Francis Crick, the guy who basically discovered DNA back in the 1950s. What does he say?
Our highly developed brains are, after all, were not evolved under the pressure of discovering scientific truths, but only to enable us to be clever enough to survive and leave descendants.
Very cool. So imagine like you developed, so in other words, on naturalism, you are prone cognitively to beliefs that promote survival. Survival is the first priority. Truth and everything else, if it's adoptive, great. If it's not, what your brains really care about on naturalism is survival. So imagine you developed a belief that all bugs are poisonous. Now that's a false belief, but it is very helpful to survival because you'll never come anywhere near a scorpion or any other types of, or a black widow spider or anything poisonous that will be dangerous to your survival. So once again, you can have a false belief, but it aids survival. And your brain would be prone to that, biased to that. So you guys, with this in mind, what this means now, let's put it together. Let's put it together. If this is what we have concluded so far, that so on naturalism, your brain is prone to forming beliefs that really help survival, even if the truth status is questionable. Then on that note, here we go. Here we conclude the following. In other words, naturalism lowers our confidence in the human mind to reach the truth, which is once again shooting yourself in the foot because naturalism is the product of the same human mind. Naturalism is the conclusion of the same human mind. So how can we be sure that's the truth and not some survival convenience? Do you guys understand that? Drop a hashtag paraphrase if you can paraphrase this in your own words. Why does it undermine the credibility of human experience? Someone paraphrase this for us. Otherwise, I will do it to make sure that you guys understand and then try to get at least one or two paraphrasings so that inshallah we know that this concept kind of gels in. All right, let me count down here quickly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Val, paraphrase it for us. Bismillah.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll give it a try. I think naturalism would then kind of be a way of the mind to try to comfort itself in not being able to explain everything, and so by basing our knowledge of reality just by what we know so far, it's just we don't want to think about anything else extraordinary or supernatural which might cause some like fear or stepping outside of our self-built comfort zone, kind of.
That's true. That's true. So let's take it all the way through. So let me paraphrase this for y'all, you guys. On naturalism, so if you haven't gotten this so far, inshallah, this will deliver it. On naturalism, your brains are shaped by evolution to prioritize survival, not necessarily the truth. And we saw what naturalists themselves had to say on this. If that's the case, where survival is a priority, not truth, then this undermines the credibility of the human mind to reach the truth in the first place. But that's you shooting yourself in the foot, because if a naturalist says that your brain is biased towards survival, not necessarily the truth, that thereby undermining the credibility of your mind, then guess what? Naturalism is the product of the human mind. How do we know it's not a survival convenience, but actually the truth? That's why it's once again self-refuting, because a naturalist is forced to conclude because of evolution, survival is what matters, not necessarily the truth. Well, then the shoe is on the other foot. How do you know naturalism is the actual truth and not a product of a survival imperative? That's where naturalism becomes a problem. Anyone care to paraphrase? I know it's a little bit of a doozy to get your head around, but this is a really, really powerful argument. Bottom line is, on naturalism, human mind is not a reliable instrument to reach the truth because we're so fixated on survival and survival and survival. And this comes back to bite naturalism itself because it is coming out of the human mind to begin with. So, any brave souls to paraphrase this? 5, 4, and 3. Mason, take a crack at it.
Basically, you're saying that evolution primed our brains to be tools used for survival, not for truth finding. So you're saying that the mind is a tool for survival, not for finding the truth. But you're saying that this statement is the truth. So you're saying you're trusting this mind for basically to be a tool for something it wasn't created for, which is reaching the truth, which is the statement you're making. So you're saying
Yes.
this mind can't be used for finding the truth, yet you're taking it as truth that the mind's not used for truth.
Well, yeah. So you at the end, I kind of lost you, but you almost had it going. So your mind is the reason why you believe in your naturalism. But your naturalism tells you that your mind is unreliable. that's where it's a self-defeating loop. So let me say that one more time. Your mind tells you naturalism is true, but naturalism says your mind is not a reliable instrument to reach the truth because it's so focused on survival. If you guys got that down, let me put this in the chat box. Your mind says that naturalism is true, but naturalism says your mind is too bogged down in survival. It prioritizes survival over truth. So then, can we trust any conclusion it makes? One of them is naturalism. There you go. Simple as that. So, try to get that into your notes. I'll give you guys a few seconds, inshallah. This is, I think, the most sophisticated argument. It's a little bit difficult to kind of wrap your head around, but man, get this down, y'all. Practice this, and our TAs will help you gel this deeply. Understand just how it's a self-defeating loop, just like we saw before. And if you were able to kind of get that into your notes, inshallah. Again, the opportunity is open for someone else to try a paraphrase and earn an easy point. Wasn't naturalism actually used as a survival mechanism by people who introduced it? As we mentioned earlier, that in Greek, paganism had reached its extreme, so naturalism was used to get rid of the superstition, and same in Europe with the religious wars. It's hard to tell that naturalism came about as a survival necessity. I'm not entirely sure. Wallahu a'lam. But even if it did, once again, if you are going to be a naturalist, you have to assume the truth of your naturalism relying on your mind. But the moment you do that, you end up undermining yourself because you just said that your brain is mainly worried about survival, not necessarily the truth. And that's where it becomes a big issue for naturalists. All right, so with this in mind, we move on to the third one. This is a much easier argument to understand, and that is, you guys, naturalism is fraught with problems. Fraught with problems when it comes to the origins of things. The origin of the universe. How did space and time just come about? That's why Big Bang is such a big issue for a naturalist. Because Big Bang is where matter begins to exist. Material reality begins to exist. That means you can't invoke a material explanation for the cause of the Big Bang because there's no matter yet. So origin of the universe is a big problem. Origin of the first enzymes and the proteins, a huge issue for a naturalist. Origin of the first cell. Just get some of these examples down. Origin of the mathematical order of the universe. Origin of language. Origin of the human consciousness and free will. Origin of anything human is a big issue for a naturalist. For now, I just want to do, what I like to do is just focus on one thing on this list, and that is the origin of the first enzymes and the protein. Why is this such a big issue for a naturalist? Sister Noura says, I'm just confused on how it would help with survival, because when they face oppression from their society because of their naturalist beliefs, so wouldn't that decrease their ability to survive? Well, that's a fascinating point. I think you guys are talking more sociologically at this point. So yeah, there will be speculations back and forth. I will focus on this third argument here, which is it's fraught with problems explaining the origins. You guys, naturalism becomes super awkward. They will dodge, duck, and hide to avoid the issues and the questions of origins. This occurs over and over again. So, origin of the first enzyme and protein. Why is this such a problem for a naturalist? I don't know if you guys know enzymes. I have a little picture here for you. Are basically strings of amino acids bonded together. And in order for an enzyme to work, to be functional, they not only have to have the right sequence in the string, that's about 150 on average, 150 string long, but then they have to have the right 3D shape. And that's a very difficult thing, because if a protein or an enzyme has the right string, but it's not the right 3D shape, it doesn't work. And on an average, an enzyme is like 150 amino acids long, and you have 20 amino acids to choose from. So imagine like a lock that has 150 dials. Each dial has 20 options. What are the odds of stitching the right amino acid that is actually functional? So let's take a look at this video so you guys can appreciate just how crazy it is on naturalism to explain this.
If proteins are indeed rare among the possible sequences of amino acids, what are the odds that mutations would stumble upon a functional combination of chemicals from the vast number of alternatives? To find out, Axe randomly altered the structure of an enzyme protein comprised of 150 amino acids.
You've got a protein 150 amino acids long, then you've got 20 to the 150th power possible ways of arranging the amino acids. Out of all those possibilities, how many are functional and how many are gibberish?
If you do the experiments and you analyze how much information is required to get, say, a new protein fold, it's just far beyond what you can get by random mutation and natural selection.
How far beyond? Axe published his findings in the Journal of Molecular Biology. He determined that among all the possible amino acid combinations, the probability of generating just one short protein by mutation is roughly 1 in 10 to the 74th power, or 1 chance in 100 trillion, 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 trillion.
To put that in context, there's only 10 to the 65 atoms in the entire galaxy. So to build a new functional protein by selection and mutation within the time allowed for the Cambrian explosion, what you're essentially having to do is equivalent to a blindfolded man looking throughout the entire galaxy for one marked atom. So what we're talking about is searching for a tiny, tiny needle in an enormous haystack and having a very limited time to search.
And you guys, it gets more difficult for them. Check this out.
Now, suppose against all odds, chemical evolution produced our single functional protein. Would we have life? No. We'd have
building upon the previous one, you guys, an enzyme, as I was saying, is about 150 amino acids long, but there are 20 amino acids to choose from. So there are a gazillion ways you can construct an enzyme, but most of them are not functional. It's not like you just put any random amino acids together and it starts working. The odds of getting one functional sequence out of all the possible ones is 1 in trillion, 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 1 to the power of 10 to the power of 74, he said. But let's just say by some crazy, ridiculous possibility, you got one protein that is actually functional. Do you have a cell now? Do you have life?
Protein. Just a lifeless arrangement of amino acids. The simplest living cell we know has more than 300 different proteins.
You guys, one cell, the simplest cell has 300 of these things. How do they come together randomly, by chance, arrange themselves in a manner that's actually functional and activate the first cell?
But so proteins are only part of the story when you consider any actual cell. Remember, you're going to have carbohydrates, complex sugars, nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, lipids, a whole variety of different chemicals which jointly constitute the living state. Those bits and pieces all have to be brought into the same microenvironment at the same moment in time.
Each chemical building block must then be assembled and organized into the network of molecular machines that will control every facet of life.
If we can appreciate exactly how hard it is to produce one molecular machine using nothing except atoms and energy, we can see that there's a profound problem, because once you have one molecular machine, you don't have a living thing. These molecular machines need other molecular machines. And even if nature was capable of producing all the molecular machines necessary, that still wouldn't be enough. They have to all be together, all in this tiny little membrane-bound space that we call a cell.
From my understanding of what it takes to make a cell, It has to happen all at once. You can't do it one bit at a time because everything works together in a causal loop. The higher level of organization transcends the pieces. The spatial organization in the cell requires that molecules end up in the right place at the right time. The DNA is copied into RNA. The polymerase that does the copying has to find the right spot in the DNA to start copying. The RNA has to somehow hook up with ribosomes, which have to be in a particular place. And the proteins then that are made have to be going to a particular place. That's an awful lot to account for by random chance.
The probability that you would get them in the same space at the same time becomes beyond unimaginable. And the probability that you would get them within a membrane enclosure, like a cell, is the next best thing to impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a fantasy at this point. Amir and Anas, talk to us, man.
I mean, this video just pretty much blew my entire mind, because here we are looking at like the easy stuff, like Allah is letting us see, Allah is letting us breathe, Allah is growing trees. But when we go this deep and see that Allah is creating cells at once while doing all of this stuff, you know, it really gives you an iman high, an iman boost.
Yes.
Because it just goes to show the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
In one cell too, y'all. I mean, the one cell is like a little factory, man. It's like, this is happening at the microscopic level. SubhanAllah, engineering that's occurring at this level. Amir, talk to us, man.
I was just gonna say, subhanAllah, you know, being in UWM and taking a whole bunch of courses and classes, you'd have a professor explaining something out of a book, most of the stuff that you don't necessarily do yourself at all. And you have hundreds, if not thousands of students who are taking this down, reading it, memorizing it, abiding to it by heart. If anyone asks them, do you know what this is? They'll say, oh, I studied that. This is exactly what it is. But it's just so, like, all I can reach is the conclusion is arrogance, how that is their mindset. But then when you tell them something as simple as something created that, then something kicks in and says, no, show me your proof. Show me your book. Let me read. Actually, I don't want to read. Actually, never mind. What you're saying is bull. It's just all fabricated. It's just, there's no reason. There's no logic to it.
Yes.
But then something at a secular university is telling you something in a book that you can't see or do. And then you take it to heart. This is the truth. This is science.
Yeah, they will not, they refuse to go beyond nature. And this is such a crazy closed-mindedness, a closed-minded view of reality. And I want you to at least become aware of it. And inshallah, slowly we'll work our way out of it. With this in mind, you guys, I get to the last point, which is, it's not really an argument, but it's more like a counter that we need to diffuse, because this is something a naturalist constantly throws at us. Sister Nuzhat, read this for us. Now, when you have, so let me set this up for you. When you have a naturalist cornered with everything we have said so far, that first of all, it's self-refuting, and that on naturalism, if you have to believe in evolution, and evolution says that your mind is more survival-oriented than truth-oriented, which is a huge problem for you because you're using your mind to get to your naturalism, which may not be true on your own worldview. The third that we saw is that you have so many problems when it comes to origins. Now, when you have a naturalist cornered, here's what they're going to say. They're going to say, go ahead, Sister Nuzhat, now.
Scientific advancement of the West was enabled because of naturalism.
Yeah, science only progressed when West adopted naturalism. And then they go on to say, go ahead.
It's only after we stopped invoking God as an explanation for everything, but rather looked for natural causes, that we advanced technologically.
Yes. You religious people, these naturalists tell us, whenever you don't understand something, you say God did it. This is what you call God of the gaps fallacy, by the way. That whenever there's a gap in our scientific understanding, you say God did it. Well, guess what then? You gotta choose between God and science. So see what naturalism does, y'all. It pitches God against science. And this is a big thing that you and I need to kind of wrap our heads around. Is this really true? Is there a conflict? Do you have to choose between God and science? How do we argue our way out of this? First, let me open it up to you guys. How do we respond, folks, as to this particular objection? That it's only after we stopped invoking God as an explanation that scientific progress took off. You know, when we started focusing on the natural causes. So how do we respond to this? I have a few responses that I want to give you. One is really, really profound that I want to make sure that you guys definitely understand. Let me call on. Let me just do a quick countdown if someone wants to take a crack at it. Otherwise, this is the last slide before the break. Here we go. Sister Zainab, what do you think?
I feel like it's almost like a cop out to say that once we stopped invoking God, then we started to discover. Nowhere in that does that tell me that God isn't the one responsible. It's just that I, as with my human mind that apparently I cannot trust, wasn't able to make those connections. That's not God's fault. You know, that doesn't disclaim his being the one who created everything. It's just my inability to recognize it.
Facts. Well said. Oh, what about the golden Islamic ages? Thank you, Sister Sana Shakir. I have that as a point coming up. You guys, here's the first thing I'm hoping you guys can get into your notes. That's first of all, they have a very flawed understanding of God as some sort of a deity from Greek mythology. Allah is not some Greek god like the god of lighting. The moment you can explain lighting, you don't need God anymore. Like some god of sea like Poseidon. The moment you understand tides and waves, you don't need God anymore. The moment you make progress in your labs, gap in science, close, oh, we don't need God anymore. No, for us, God is the creator of the whole show, of the heavens and the earth, of the things we do understand and don't understand. So that's the first thing. They keep thinking of God as some material thing that is tied to some physical thing, like a Greek god. And the moment we can explain it scientifically, we're like, okay, that god just got canceled. That's the first issue. Here's the second one, and this is profound. This may not make sense initially, but let me break this down for you. You got God is an explanation at the level of an agent, not mechanism. This is a very, very profound thing to get your head around. God is an explanation at the level of an agent, not a mechanism. Pull up your chat boxes for a second and do me a favor and just answer the following question. Do you guys know who invented the first functional car? Do you guys know? 5, 4, just to throw some names there. Who invented the first functional car? Henry Ford. Very good. Henry Ford is the one who invented the first car. You guys, if I understand everything mechanically about the engine and the laws of internal combustion, does that do away with Henry Ford? No, because Henry is an explanation for the car at the level of an agent. Laws of internal combustion are an explanation at the level of mechanism. Understood, folks? Okay, here's another example that inshallah should get the point across. You guys imagine on my stove, water is boiling in this cup. And someone asks you, what's the cause of this water boiling? So one of you say, oh, the reason the water is boiling is because water molecules are being stirred by the heat, creating this stir and this boiling. The other person says, oh, the reason water is boiling is because Brother Amir is trying to make tea. Now, are these explanations contradictory? No, because one of them is an explanation at the level of mechanism, which is what chemistry is. That heat is being applied to water molecules and that's why they're boiling. As for me making the tea, that's also an explanation at the level of an agent. There's no conflict there. When you're studying mechanism, it doesn't come at the expense of the agent. And when you're looking at the agent, it doesn't come at the expense of a mechanism. When I study a chair and I study the wood, when I see how it's structured and like how they come together in the glue, it doesn't get rid of the carpenter. That's an agent. So don't confuse mechanism with agency. This is very, very important. Yeah, Plato's 4 causes. I think it's Aristotle, but I guess that was his teacher, so he probably got some of it from him. Fair enough. Please, you guys get this point. God is an explanation at the level of an agent, not mechanism. You know, you appreciating watercolors and their chemistry will not get rid of Picasso and Van Gogh. So, keeping this in your mind, understand both explanations are mutually inclusive, not exclusive. You understanding mechanism should not get rid of the agent. Similarly, you guys, this is how similarly, when Isaac Newton discovered the law of gravity, he didn't say, well, I don't need God anymore. No, he said, what a brilliant God to do it that way. More you know of engineering, more you admire the Rolls-Royce engineers. More you know about arts, more you admire Picasso and Van Gogh. More you know about the universe and its mechanisms, more you admire the agent behind it. That's how we think. So, with this in mind, inshallah, it's 12:36. I want to do, if you guys with me, sorry, there's one more slide I need to do so that inshallah after the break we can go right into the fine-tuning argument. Let me take another 5 to 10 minutes from you guys. You guys, I know we've been at it for a bit and your brains are probably hurting a little bit because we went through a lot. But let me, oh, by the way, here's the golden age thing. In the East, by the way, we only experience the golden ages of scientific advancements because of religion. So don't impose your Western experience upon us. Speak for yourself almost. So if you guys have all these down, make sure you get the examples I gave about Henry Ford, the coffee cup, and other examples, so you know God is an explanation at the level of an agent, not a mechanism. So with this in mind, we're gonna end, inshallah, today's session on this very important slide, and that is, you guys allow me to introduce what we call the intellectual toolkit. This is the first time you guys are seeing something like this. Think of this intellectual toolkit as one of the greatest benefits of dismantling doubts. I kid you not. Because I'm going to give you about 4 to 5 principles throughout the entire course. Today is going to be the first one. That are literally Iman savers. And I'm not exaggerating. These principles are the results of years of thinking. And what they do is that they organize your thinking. Discipline your thinking to a point that even if you don't have an answer to a problematic question, but you have these principles down, they'll keep you sane, grounded. They will orient you in the right direction. So here is the first principle, inshallah, and that is written on the top for you. Induction equals probable knowledge. Now, what the heck does that mean? If you guys can bring up your chat boxes for me and just quickly answer the following question for me. Do you guys know already what inductive reasoning is by any chance? 5, 4, yes or no's? Do you guys know what inductive reasoning is? I only have one answer here. Bara says implicit. Have you ever heard of it? And I don't expect anyone to know, and I'm going to explain it in a way where no one knows what inductive reasoning is. So that's okay completely, but I just want to know how much of the class has heard of something like that. So allow me to break down inductive reasoning for you. Inductive reasoning is basically when you have a bunch of data points and you read in, which is where the word induction comes from, you read in a theory that best fits the data, that best explains the data. So you have a bunch of data points and your interpretation from inductive, that's how you remember it, you interpreting the data and making it fit, that is inductive reasoning. So let's do a quick survey. You guys take a look at these data points on the screen real quick for me, and this should be on your guidebook as well. You guys tell me, just put on the chat boxes for me. If I asked you to theorize, read in what shape best fits this data, what would you say? Let me see if I get triangle. Very good. So I think you would say a triangle neatly fits the explanation. You notice this reading in, this interpretation, that's what you call inductive reasoning. Now, in real life, how does this work? Well, imagine you're on the crime scene. There's a weapon, a data point, a hair, a fingerprint, a little bit of blood containing essentially the same DNA, and you read in Jeffrey was the killer. Now, here's where it gets things really, really interesting, y'all. Pay attention. So remember, we were looking at the data points. Imagine you were performing your experiments. Yeah? And as you're performing these experiments, another data point is discovered. Y'all tell me now, this time around, what would be the best shape that fits the data? It's going to be a square. Notice what happened. Notice what happened. Triangle explanation no longer fits the theory. You need a new theory, a square that best explains the data. You guys, this right here, in the simplest way that I can give you, this right here is exactly how science works. Our observations and data points continue to increase. And therefore, our scientific theories have to keep changing to keep up with ever-growing data. Have you guys noticed, and if you guys can give me an example, I'll give you half a point. Have you guys noticed how scientific theories continue to change? Can someone give me some examples of where scientific theories have changed? I'll give me a quick example. I'll get you started. We have a lot of different theories on how many meals you should have per day. Is it 3 meals? Is it 6 meals? There's a lot of theories on whether milk is good for you or is it bad for you. Gravity, Sister Rabia, what do you know about gravity? Which theory of gravity are you talking about? If you don't mind me asking.
I think I was thinking of Einstein's theory, and then I think later it was changed.
Very cool. I think you're talking about Newton's theory, which was changed by Einstein.
Yes.
Yes, very good. Excellent example. Half a point for you. Let me hear from sun orbiting the earth. So those are way in the past. I'm talking about more in the last 100 years, where a scientific theory was changed. Molecular makeup of matter. Amar, what about it? If you could talk it out, if you could, whatever is easy for you.
Yeah, so like over time, as they discover, I remember like learning about this in physics. As they got like more in depth, they learned about different components.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense. So you guys notice what's happening. Normally we have limited data, so our theories are going to be limited. But as technology increases, we're able to see more, observe more, our data points increase, and therefore, our theories are constantly in a flux. This is why I'm saying on the top, induction gives you probable knowledge, approximate knowledge, not certain knowledge. Why? Because we have limited data points, and with technological advancements, as we expand, we observe more and discover more, our theories constantly need to be updated. So let me give you some famous examples of where this happens to be true. Einstein superseded Newton. Newton's equations are fantastically accurate, but they don't work with objects traveling at the speed of light. So when we got additional data points of objects at that speed, or at the subatomic level, or when we were observing what was happening with Mercury, and the data points, again, were not really fitting the data, Einstein came along and gave a different theory, an updated theory, which does fit the data. But even that needs modifications, which will likely come in the future. Here's another example, y'all. Actually, I want to ask you guys, in this class, we have talked about a theory that was super prevalent. But then with additional discoveries, it was changed. We discussed this in the Kalam argument. Anybody remembers? 5, 4. Very good, brother. The universe expanding. Very nice. Faraz bhai, you're a TA, but we're going to give it to Sister Zainab, inshallah. Yes. You guys remember that the static model of the universe in the 19th century, everybody felt the universe was static, not expanding, not contracting, and then Hubble came around. Additional data points, and now steady model no longer fit the data. It had to be changed, and that's where the expanding universe and the Big Bang became the standard theory. Now you guys check this out. I'm not even going to the 20th century. This happened in April 2021. I don't know how many of you saw this. This was all over the internet. Here we go. What's next for physics standard model? Muon results throw theories into confusion. You know, if you read this article, what the article says, that our understanding of how physics works right now and our laws of physics may entirely be about to be changed because of some wobble that they experience in muons, which are cousins of electrons. Don't worry about that. They said our understanding of standard physics as it is right now and the laws of physics may entirely change. Someone made a comment underneath. They're like, I'm glad I didn't take physics seriously because, well, it's all about to change anyways. Well, that's the nature of scientific progress. Because we have pixels, not the picture. Yeah, you guys, someone tell me, why am I telling you all of this? Why am I telling you all of this? Because, someone connect the dots for me. What is the ultimate point we're trying to make? Why am I telling you all of this? The science is in a flux, it gives you probable knowledge, and the theories constantly need updating. Why am I telling you we don't see the picture? Well, here's the ultimate thing. 5, 4, 3, 2. That's true. Sister Aina, what do you have for us?
Is it that science is based on inductive reasoning? So as we get more facts, like things will change. So science itself cannot be like
the ultimate criteria of what's true and not true, right? So you guys, here's what I'm saying ultimately. Implication is science gives probable knowledge, which is subject to revision. Therefore, we take it with a grain of salt. We don't undermine it, we don't demean it, but we put it in its place. So next time you come across a scientific theory that seems to be challenging a little bit to your faith, understand its probable knowledge that may be revised 10 years from now. You guys, here's a big climax that I've been building up to. In the Quran, Allah tells you, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. We have constructed the heavens and we are expanding them. Can you imagine a Muslim in the 20th century or in the 19th century when the steady state was prevalent? He reads the Quran and Allah is like, we're expanding the universe. And they're like, but Einstein says it's steady state. And their faith is shaken. Can you imagine losing your faith for a half-baked scientific theory which science will catch up to a little bit later? One fossil record discovery can throw off our entire understanding of evolution, y'all, because we have pixels, not the picture. Bottom line is, and this is the analogy I'll end on. I like to give the analogy of a sandcastle. You know, scientific theories are these neat, beautiful theories that are like a sandcastle. But one new wave of data might crumble it. So we have to be careful. You have to be careful just how much weight you put on upon a particular theory, because you never know what massive revisions it will go through. So that is the main thing that I wanted to inshallah communicate. Sister Zainab, if you wanted to say something, inshallah, otherwise we'll take a break.
No, yeah, I just I don't, some people know that I'm currently getting my doctorate, and it's interesting because we do all this like theory and science and study and all this sort of stuff, but specifically in nursing and in healthcare in general, we always have this like overarching idea that things will change. Like we can do all the research we want, but at the end of the day, we cannot predict anything. Clearly, the past year and a half has like shaken healthcare to its core. We don't know what we're doing 95% of the time. So even though we do all this study and we learn about all these theories, there's always this like this umbrella understanding that at the end of the day, what's happening in the real world is what we should be addressing, not all these theories and all these thoughts that are in textbooks. And like there's always like a cardinal rule of nursing is look at the patient, not the numbers. I don't care what the monitor says. I'm talking to my patient who's clearly talking to me, so they're not flatlining. Yeah. And so that's like the thing that we always pay attention to, which is kind of brought me back from all this. So.
Barakallah feek, barakallah feek. You guys, one thing I wanted to make sure that I hope no one walks away with the understanding that we are kind of throwing shade on science. That is not the intention at all. All we're doing is we're trying to put science in its place. And whatever I've shared with you right now, this is not the product of my mind. Philosophers of science, this is something they will tell you. And any humble scientist or any honest scientist that you deal with, for instance, I was talking to someone who's a researcher in a lab, and they study biome, which is basically bacteria in your gut and all over your body. And you have more bacteria in your body than you have cells. It's just crazy. And he says, we know very little about how these bacteria interact. And he says, any research paper that you read on it, you appreciate the humility because they will give you 18 disclaimers. This research paper only applies in these circumstances, under these conditions, under these variables. They're telling you just how specific you got to get before we can make any conclusion. That's what the reality of science is a humble study of reality, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to approximate it. You may never get the true picture. So please keep that in your mind. Inductive reasoning, which is what scientific method is, gives you probable knowledge. So don't be in a rush to destroy your entire worldview on a theory that might be revised a few years from now. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us that deep understanding. Inshallah, we'll pause right here, and we will inshallah continue. And it's 12:50 right now. We'll inshallah continue at 1. And we'll try to get through as much of the fine-tuning argument as we can. Thank you very much, you guys. Well-deserved break. I'll put up the points right now, and inshallah we'll go from there. Here we go. Any questions? Please DM Sister Hiba, and inshallah she'll take care of you. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. You guys, we are ready to dive in now into the third argument. What we call the argument from design that God is the best explanation for the fine-tuning observed in the universe. This right here is a remarkable argument. And in my opinion, it is as convincing and as easy to understand as the mathematical argument. It's in your face, digestible, and I feel like any reasonable person with an open mind, not brainwashed by naturalism, they can't help but infer an intelligent designer. So, with this in mind, inshallah, let us begin. Sister Nuzhat, are you here? Ready to guide us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Bismillah. Go ahead. Go ahead and read for us.
In recent years, scientific community has been stunned by the discovery of the precisely calibrated and delicately balanced properties in nature, without which there would be no life, no matter, and no chemistry.
In other words, scientists are discovering over the last few hundred years that you guys, there are aspects of nature that are so exact, so precise, that even if they were slightly different, slightly stronger, slightly weaker, or absent, there would be no possibility of life, period. There will be no chemistry. There will be no chemical reactions. Here, I like to show my students this dial. If you guys could take a look at this. So imagine if there was a control panel of the universe, where there's a dial that lets you set gravity and electromagnetism and ratio of protons and neutrons and all the properties of the universe. Scientists are telling us that if these dials were precise as they are now, that we see in nature, and they aren't collectively, synergistically working together as they are now, forget life. Forget there will be no matter, there will be no universe. So that's the first thing that you wanna get down in your notes. Second thing I want you to put into your notes. Go ahead, Sister Noza.
These life-permitting conditions appear from the very inception of the universe.
You guys, now scientists using math and like particle collision, they can determine what universe would have been like in the first trillionth second of the universe. I'm not exaggerating. 10 to the power of negative 43. There's some massive astronomical numbers they give you, but let me make it simple for y'all. We know exactly what happened in the first second when the universe came into being based on certain mathematical models and particle collision. And you know what scientists are telling us now? They're finding that from the get-go, the initial conditions of the universe had to be so astronomically fine-tuned that without them, Big Bang would have been a big bust. And universe would have collapsed upon itself before it could ever take off. And then finally, here's a third thing to put in your notes. Go ahead, Sister Nuzhat.
This fine-tuning have been detected in physics, cosmology, biochemistry, and more.
Wherever you look, you find evidence of fine-tuning, as if universe was designed for intelligent life. By the way, just so y'all know, atheists or theists, all scientists agree the universe is fine-tuned for life. But it's how they interpret the data. It's what they read in. If you have your naturalist glasses on, then you have to do some serious intellectual and verbal gymnastics to explain it all the way. And we're going to see how they kind of explain it all the way in a second. But right now, I am so excited to present some of these examples. You guys bring your hashtag game on. This, once again, should give you the Iman high that you experience in the mathematical argument. Incredible facts of nature that are so precisely calibrated so you and I can be here today. Folks, before we move on into these examples, just so you have some terminology down, in the scientific literature, these properties, these precisely calibrated, exact properties that I'm referring to, they're called fundamental constants of nature. Another word that you'll see is life-permitting conditions. Just go ahead and get those two things down. I'm going to be using them synonymously. Sometimes I'll say fundamental constants, sometimes I will say properties, sometimes I will say life-permitting conditions. We all of them refer to the same thing. Okay, so we're gonna go subject by subject and we're gonna just look at some examples. You guys, there's like 70 plus examples that are documented. I can only give you the tip of the iceberg right now, just to appetize you a little bit. And hopefully, inshallah, you guys will go and study on your own. Okay, let's start with physics. Yeah, so I'm gonna become a little bit of a physics teacher. Although my biggest goal as I'm presenting these examples, my goal was to bring examples that anyone can appreciate with zero background knowledge in science. That's to the best of my ability. I'm going to bring those examples. And if it's still hard for you, then we know what grade you got in your natural science class. So here we go. I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. Here we go. You guys, let's start with physics. You guys remember this equation I showed you a while ago that I actually took the pain, I took the trouble of explaining to you? This right here is a universal law of gravitation discovered by Isaac Newton. And you guys remember that G? That G right there is the G. That's your gravitational constant, which is built into the very fabric of nature. And it has the same value every time you calculate gravity. Now watch this. Ready? Get this into your notes. Go ahead, Sister Nusat. The G is the OG. I like that, but that's better.
If the gravitational constant G was slightly stronger, all stars would have been red dwarfs, unable to support life-bearing planets.
And this is coming from the book that I have referenced in your guidebook, Barrow and Tipler. This is according to their researcher. This is according to their research. And by the way, both of them are naturalists. I think Agnos, I could be wrong, but they're definitely strong naturalists. And they wrote that book actually to try to explain away, as we're gonna see how they're gonna try to explain all this data away. So anyway, these are some of the conclusions that they have reached that I'm sharing with you right now. All stars would have been red dwarfs, unable to support life-bearing planets. Continue.
If slightly weaker, the universe would have been composed exclusively of blue giants, which burned too briefly for life-sustaining elements to develop.
Either way, Mother Earth wouldn't be a possibility. Basic elements like carbon and oxygen wouldn't be a possibility. And that leads me to the second example from physics, and that's it. We're going to move on. Goal is to give just 2 to 3 examples in every subject. So you have plenty of examples, so you know that we're not making a big deal out of just one example. That's really the purpose of me bringing as many useful analogies and examples for you to the best degree that I can. Here we go, you guys. Bring up your chat boxes up real quick. Let me test your knowledge of chemistry real quick before I can kind of build up on it. You guys, an atom's nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. This is not for points, but just you guys are on the same page with me. What is the charge of the proton, real quick? Charge of the proton is positive, which is why it's called a proton. Very good. And what's the charge of the neutron? Neutron is neutral. There is no charge. Very good. So some of you are saying negative. Remember, that's the electron. Neutron has no charge. Very good. Now, someone tell me, please. You guys, when you take 2 magnets and put the positive ends together, what happens? They repel. Very good. So someone tell me, why in the world that in the nucleus of an atom are all the protons that are all positively charged, why aren't they repelling each other? Who can tell me? 5, 4. Why are the positive protons that are all together, why aren't they repelling each other? You said because of electrons, but the electrons are electrons should come and maybe they can attach themselves to the protons, but the protons are still jumbled up together. What is causing them to stay together? Here we go. Anas, wow, gluons. It's actually the correct answer. But here's an answer that's easy to understand. Inside the nucleus of an atom, you have a force called the strong nuclear force that literally rubber bands, glues the protons together. And that's why the atomic bomb is so deadly, because you know what they do when they create an atomic bomb? They split an atom, so these bonds are severed, and the nuclear force is unleashed. That's why the atomic bomb is so deadly. So if you understood this, now go ahead and read this for me. Go ahead, Sister Nusrat.
If the strong force which holds the atom together was strong by 1%, carbon wouldn't have formed.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, there are tons of such examples. I'm just stimulating you, giving you tip of the iceberg. All right, so with this in mind, if you hopefully got 1 or 2 examples of that, and this wasn't discussed when I took chemistry. I feel the same way. Honestly, I study chemistry now, and there's so many names: leptons, muons, gluons, and I'm like, What happened in the last 10 years? Because I can't even recognize half of these names, and I had to study chemistry to teach Dismantling Doubts, which was another, brain wreck. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Cosmology. Remember the dials, y'all. Remember the dials. So go ahead. Sister Nusa, just read this first.
Okay. From the first second of the Big Bang, the expansion rate of the universe must have been calibrated to 1 part in 1 over 10 to the power of 60.
Do you understand how crazy large that number is? To give you an idea of how big that number is, do you know the total number of atoms in the universe are estimated at 10 to the power of 60? Yeah, that's 60 zeros after 10. So Bill Gates, his wealth, or Jeff Bezos, his wealth is 10 to the power of 8. You know, this is 10 to the power of 60, just to give you some idea. The expansion had to be so precisely calibrated. And where is this coming from? Stephen Hawking himself. Go ahead, Sister Nusa.
Hawking estimated that even a decrease of 1 part in a million would have resulted in the universe's recollapse long ago. A similar increase would have prevented the galaxies from condensing out of the expanding matter.
Keep going.
Per Roger Penrose, to get the universe like ours, the initial entropy of the universe at the Big Bang had to be to the precision of 1 to the power of 10 to the power of 123.
Oh my God. These are incomprehensibly large numbers. This is how accurate the Big Bang had to be. This is how accurate and precise gravity has to be right now for life to be even possible. There, let me show you guys a video that will inshallah really drive this point home.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely.
There you go. You guys, let me share with you what's happening in astronomy. Subhanallah. Once again, this one brings it home just a little bit more. Sister Nuzhat, go ahead and read this for us.
Jupiter is Earth's cosmic shield. Its overbearing gravity acts as a gravitational shield, deflecting comets and asteroids away from the inner solar system.
Keep going.
Moon's optimal distance stabilizes the tilt of the Earth's spin axis, seasons, tidal waves, and temperatures.
And finally,
Earth's electromagnetic field deflects deadly radiations from the sun.
yes. Again, try to get 1 or 2 facts so that you have something to reference and jog your memory when you look back at it later. Just incredible variables, so many of them that had to go in our favor for us to be here today, that we take for granted. Reminds me of the ayah, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا, that if you even attempted to count God's blessings, you wouldn't be able to, let alone thank Him for those blessings. And then finally, here we go, for biochemistry. So here, once again, let me set the stage for y'all to make sure that you guys appreciate this. I know it's been rusty if you're not in the field. You guys, here what you're looking at is a neutron, proton, and an electron. And I've given the circle a greater size based on their actual size. So you can tell here, neutron is the biggest. And neutrons and protons are very similar, but proton is slightly smaller and electron is the smallest of all. So we know now, scientifically, mass of a neutron is slightly heavier than a proton. And hopefully you can see that in the picture, where the circle of N is a little bit bigger than P. We also know, check this out, the difference in their mass, like when you subtract the mass of a neutron and a proton, the difference in their mass is slightly bigger than that of an electron. Yeah. Now, why am I telling you all this? Why am I boring you with this? This delicate ratio prevents protons from decaying into neutrons, which if it happened, would make life impossible. The ratio of protons and neutrons is actually very, very strategic. And this is, once again, these are facts that we are learning just now. Here's another one for you guys. You guys take a look at this picture right here. In the middle is the nucleus. And around it are electrons. You're looking at potassium, by the way, with 19 electrons. Now, what the heck are these rings? These are what you call orbitals or shells around the nucleus, which the electrons kind of revolve around in. And think of like planets in their orbits, or like, mashallah, us doing tawaf, if you will, of the Kaaba, whatever helps you visualize. This is how, in some approximate way, this is how an atom is organized. Now, electrons are not as neat as planets, they're kind of messy, but this kind of captures what's happening at the subatomic level. You guys, check this out. There's a principle in chemistry called Pauli exclusion principle. This principle says only 2 electrons can occupy the lowest orbital, the red ring in the picture. Take a look at it. Closer the ring is to the nucleus, lower the energy it has. And this principle tells us that only 2 electrons can occupy the lowest orbital, which is the closest ring that you see. And notice it only has 2 electrons. Why is this a big deal? Had that not been the case, likely most electrons would cluster in the lowest orbital, preventing chemical bonding. Hopefully you guys remember from chemistry, in order for a chemical reaction to occur, is the electrons in the outer orbitals, they're the free-floating ones. They're the extroverted electrons jumping ships and making connections. If all the electrons were in the lower orbitals, there wouldn't be any free-floating electrons to have chemical reactions. Yeah. And then, of course, you can't talk about biochemistry without talking about water. You guys, water defies so many chemical expectations to enable life. It's unreal. Here, check this out, a small little video for y'all.
Water. You might not see it, but this is probably the strangest thing in the universe. Water doesn't follow the normal rules of chemistry. For a start, it shouldn't really be a liquid on our planet. A water molecule is made from 2 very light atoms, hydrogen and oxygen. And at the temperatures and pressures on the surface of the Earth, the rules of chemistry say that water should be a gas. And unlike any other chemical, when water freezes, it expands. And so ice floats on water. Now, you see this every day, but take a moment to think about how weird that is. Over time, this odd behavior has been very useful. By insulating the water underneath, floating ice has enabled complex life to survive and evolve on our planet, despite the many ice ages that have frozen the Earth's surface solid. And the strangeness just goes on and on. Did you know that hot water freezes faster than cold? Yes, really. No one knows why. Water molecules can flow upwards against the force of gravity. That's because they love to stick to each other. They're so good at it that they can actually pull each other up through tiny channels, such as the tiny blood vessels in your body. That's how oxygen and nutrients reach the edges of your brain. The same process, called capillary action, allows plants to move water from deep below the ground to nourish the leaves and branches that grow in the sunshine. Our solar system is drowning in water. Once upon a time, we thought that we were alone on Earth with so much water. But in fact, it's the second most common molecule in the universe. We now know there's water on the Moon, on Mars, Pluto. In fact, there's H2O on almost every object in our solar system. And where there's water, there could be life. So pour yourself a glass of water now and take a good look at this colorless, featureless, and tasteless material. It's actually remarkable. It breaks so many rules of chemistry that scientists struggle to understand it. But without its rebel behavior, none of us, nor our world, would exist. You're only here watching this video because water is so strange.
SubhanAllah. Hopefully I've given you enough examples and you're starting to see just how many how many factors had to be in our favor. Precisely designed, precisely placed and situated for us to be here, even watching this video and appreciating it. Here's the last one, which is unbelievably mind-blowing. If someone watches this, literally a cell is a factory that puts a gigafactory of Tesla to shame, as you're about to see. I'm just shocked. Someone looks at this and they're not able to infer a designer. Like, what common sense do you, like, to what degree you have to deny and snooze your common sense for that? Here we go.
In 1957, Francis Crick first proposed that chemicals called bases along the spine of the DNA molecule function as alphabetic characters in a written language or digital characters in a machine code. This animation shows how this digital information directs protein synthesis. First, a large protein complex separates the tightly wound strands of the DNA to prepare it to be copied. During this process of transcription, a protein complex called a polymerase produces a single-stranded copy of the original instructions. Here we see this copy, a messenger RNA molecule, being constructed inside the polymerase as individual bases are positioned and added to the growing strand. Now we see the polymerase in action from the outside as it spits out the messenger RNA transcript. Next, this RNA transcript approaches and passes through a molecular machine called the nuclear pore complex, an information recognition device that controls the flow of information in and out of the cell's nucleus.
Wow.
Now we see the genetic assembly instructions on the messenger RNA approaching and arriving at a two-part chemical factory called a ribosome, the site of protein synthesis. As the messenger RNA transcript passes through the ribosome, the process of translation begins. During translation, a mechanical assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids in accord with the instructions on the transcript. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell by molecules called transfer RNAs, which link specific sequences of bases to corresponding amino acids. The sequential arrangement of the amino acids determines the type of protein constructed. When the construction of the chain is complete, it is transported to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape required to perform its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is released into the outer cytoplasm to do its job in the cell.
Yeah, this is one cell, y'all. Mason, what do you got for us?
Reflections just based on like school. Like when you're learning all this stuff in school, they make it so dry. They make it seem so like matter of fact. Like, of course, this is the way things happen. They don't really focus on how mind-blowingly complex all this stuff is, how incredible it is.
This is one of the issues with naturalism. It's spiritually bankrupt because once you take the designer, God out of it, it's just random things producing random stuff. There's like no meaning to it. Remember going back to the first day of the class, it divorces reality of all meaning and all purpose. Is nothing is intentionally designed anymore. And therefore science becomes so dry. Math becomes so dry. I hated honestly most of my math classes, but the way I study math now and the awe I get, it's completely changed my approach to math. And I wish someone had introduced to me Sir Isaac Newton in the manner that I'm introduced to now. Why he wrote Mathematica Principia, probably one of the greatest scientific books ever written. The man was trying to convince a thinking man to reach their belief in a deity. And we're going to see, actually, let's actually get to that real quick. I have some statements for y'all that if you guys wanted to. Sister Nusrat, read this for us. Look at what Sir Isaac Newton says.
The most beautiful system of the suns, planets, and comets could. Oh, I think I lost it. Okay, sorry. The most beautiful system of the suns, planets, and comets could only be proceeded from the counsel and domain of an intelligent and powerful being.
Very cool. And then look at what Stephen Hawking. Now we know he is an atheist, but I mean, you still can't help but make observations that you're making. Look at what he says.
The overwhelming impression is one of order. The more we discover about the universe, the more we find that it is governed by rational laws.
And I already shared with you guys the Einstein's quote earlier, so that's already in your guidebook. If you were trying to get the quotes down, let me put them up again so you can get them into your notes. Meanwhile, while people are copying notes, feel free to drop hashtags if you wanted to share your reflections. Honestly, studying nature and natural sciences, which I never took seriously because I am a soulless accountant, or at least that was my field. If I could, rewind time and go back, I would honestly do it with much more purpose and much more fulfillment. Anas, talk to us.
So the thing I think that's blowing my mind the most is that as I was watching those videos you were showing us, is just like all of that. If I as a human being tried to do that like in a larger version, could not be able to do it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it in one cell, just one that we can't even see with the naked eye. So I think that's what's shocking me so much, is that like I even put it in the chat box, is like, how can you be so like, no offense to anybody, but how can you just be so dumb to not realize that there is just a higher intelligence that's making this happen in one cell, let alone in the whole universe,
Yeah. One thing I came across, I think Stephen Meyer, he was saying this. He said, we all know that if you wanted to create new computer functionality, you need code. You need new information. And when you create new code, it gives you new software, new parts to your computers. He says, your biological life works the same way. DNA is that code. And a human being, when you look at the code, you know there was a programmer. Yet for whatever reason, we look at DNA and we refuse to infer a designer. It's really ajib, the double standards that kind of click in. You guys, this is one of my this again, once again, this is why I respect Sir Isaac Newton so much. Look at this. Sister Nuzad, read this for us.
When Voltaire was in England in 1726, a year before Newton's death, he had several conversations with Samuel Clarke, Newton's devoted philosophical friend. Voltaire says about Samuel.
If you know anything about Voltaire, Voltaire made a career out of making fun of Catholicism. Now, he was a believer in God, he was not an atheist, and most people at that time were not atheists. Still, in the United States right now, only 5% of the people are actually professed atheists. Atheists has always been a minority, will remain a minority. However, non-religiously affiliated individuals are on the rise, which is still worrisome. When Voltaire, who is, again, very averse to Christianity, was in England in 1726, he got to meet a friend of Newton, Samuel. Now check this out. Here we go. Sister Nuzad, go ahead. Voltaire is talking here. Sorry.
This philosopher always pronounced the name of God with an air of contemplation and extreme respect. I acknowledge the impression this made on me. He told me that he had acquired this habit from Newton.
Mm. And this comes in the book, in this French book. So, I don't know if you guys are able to, if you're feeling what I'm feeling or you got what I got from this. When Newton would pronounce the name of Allah, he would do it with such awe and reverence that his friend Samuel picked up that habit from him. And when Voltaire visited Samuel and he sees that he says the name of Allah, kind of like we say Subhanallah, like we say Jalla wa ala, Tabaraka wa ta'ala, Fatabarakallah, with an air of contemplation and extreme respect, that it made an impression on Samuel, and then from Samuel it made an impression on Voltaire. And that tells you spirituality often passes from a person to person. Spirituality is not a dry book exercise. It's when you spend time with people who are spiritually elevated, it rubs you the right way. Yeah. So once again, this is one of the greatest scientific mind in human history. And this is what his awe of God continues to increase as he increases in his discoveries. It's remarkable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, in the Quran tells us about designs. Many features of design in the world that we should be observing. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternation of the night and day, in the ships that sail the seas with goods for people, in water which God sends down from the sky to give life to the earth when it's barren, scattering all kinds of creatures over it, in the changing directions of the winds, and in the clouds subordinated in the atmosphere. Certainly in all of these are signs for those who use their intellect. That's what your intellect, that's the conclusion your intellect should be reaching. It's 1:34, you guys. What I like to do is at least take one objection, and then inshallah we'll park the rest for next time. But I really got to get through this objection to try to keep try to keep us honest and pacing the course along so we can finish in time. You guys, here's the $1 million question now. Scientific community, the naturalist scientific community, is looking at the same evidence you are. They see a cell and how it's like putting an Amazon fulfillment center to a shame. They look at that. They're looking at this astounding complexity, such brilliant design, fine-tuning to the incomprehensible degree. I mean, they should be falling in sajda like the magicians of Pharaoh, you would think. Yeah? Universe is crying out that it's designed. But how do they weasel out of that? Well, let me introduce you to two ideas that they have developed in response to fine-tuning. And effectively, by using these two ideas, they've tranquilized the entire naturalist community. And you can begin to imagine how widespread these two responses are. Whenever you bring up fine-tuning, this is what they throw at you. And through this, they can snooze their logic, their spiritual instinct. These are the two ideas that are their crutches, so they don't have to infer a designer. And they say fine-tuning doesn't need any explanation. It's nothing to be surprised about. Really, how do they get to that? Here we go. Well, hopefully we're going to be able to cover this objection today. So, here comes John the Atheist, yeah, to be our buzzkill. John the Atheist says, and I need you guys to try to answer this first before I just come to the rescue. Sister Nuzhat, go ahead.
Why are you so impressed that the universe is suited for existence? Of course, universe has properties favorable to us, because if they weren't, you wouldn't be alive to notice.
Understand what he's getting at, right? Since we are alive, universe had to be life permitting, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be alive to observe it, to appreciate it. So what's all the commotion about? What are you guys getting all in awe about? He goes on to explain himself that if these constants and properties were different, that you're raving about, if they were different, guess what? You wouldn't exist, and maybe a different life form would exist in light of those different properties and conditions. And then they would feel, oh my God, look at how nature is designed for us. When in reality, the universe isn't fine-tuned for you, you're fine-tuned for the universe. Universe isn't favorable to you. It's just that you happen to evolve a certain way in light of whatever the conditions are. Kind of like water. You know how it takes on the shape? You know how water takes on the shape to fit the container? Well, guess what? We evolve to fit the universe. So what are you getting all surprised about? Do you guys understand? The objection is kind of subtle, but I want to see if you guys understood the objection. And if you did understand the objection, then how would you respond to it? Understand so first of all, it's a little subtle. Whoever wants to answer, they need to paraphrase the objection here a little bit. This is basically their way of saying, why are you getting surprised? There's no explanation needed. Yeah, so Mason, come to the rescue, man. What's up?
So I guess the paraphrased version would be like, no matter which way the universe was created, a life form would have arisen to fit those conditions.
Yes, I love it. Love it. Very good. Keep on. Keep going.
And then my response to that objection is you could ask them, well, what would that universe look like? Give an example of that kind of a universe, because we saw in the previous couple slides that if even one constant was changed, not only would the universe be different, but the universe and the periodic table and all the elements wouldn't even exist.
Excellent. That's the first response. Actually, so go ahead and get this down. Thank you, Mason, for this one. Actually, if these constants and properties were different, no life form would emerge. You wouldn't even have matter. You wouldn't even have the Big Bang. So that's the first thing. And here's the second response we give y'all. Secondly, you're dodging the main question. Are you guys realizing he completely dodged the main question? I don't know if y'all picked up on this. You're dodging the main question. The question is not why are we a certain way in light of whatever conditions. The question is why is universe a certain way to begin with any properties at all, with any fine-tuning at all. So the question, so going back to the water container analogy, the question is not about the water and the what shape water is in. The question is, why is the container shaped like a flask to begin with? That's the real question here. Why does the universe have any fine-tuned properties to begin with, favorable to whatever? But it has a certain structure. It has certain properties. It has a mathematical blueprint that we happen to be suited to. Sure, us being suited to it, sure, that's not a big deal. But the fact the universe has a certain structure, that still demands an explanation. I have a really cool example that I think really gets this point across. I will quickly read it off to you guys as you guys are taking notes. You don't have to write this down, just enjoy this. Imagine you're arrested in Stalin Russia for a crime and death penalty is given. You're dragged in front of a firing squad of trained marksmen standing very closely to you, and you hear the command, ready, aim, fire. You hear the deafening sounds of the gun, and then you observe that you're still alive, that all 70 marksmen missed. What's your reaction? Well, according to John the Atheist, I shouldn't be surprised that they all missed. After all, if they hadn't missed, I wouldn't be alive to know about it. Nothing more to be explained here. But obviously, that would be ridiculous to have that kind of a response. Our reaction is, well, it's true that there's little surprise about me not being dead, because if I was dead, I wouldn't be alive to observe it. But I should be surprised at the observation that I am alive in light of the enormous improbability that all the marksmen would miss. In fact, I would conclude that this was a setup engineered by someone. So this is how we kind of articulate our way out of it. So let me go back to the previous slide so you guys were able to kind of put this in your notes. So this is the famous anthropic principle, where they basically say, well, this is what they call the observation bias, that when we look out in nature, obviously we're going to pick up conditions that are favorable to us, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. So once again, to summarize the response, we say back to them, the question is not about us. The question is about the universe. Why does the universe have any structure to begin with? That cries out for an explanation. So this is where, once you kind of go through this is where they throw the multiverse at you. So here's where John the Atheist will say, go ahead, Sister Nuzhat.
Here is why I am not surprised that there are any properties to begin with. It's because the multiverse theory tells us that there are an infinite number of universes out there with their own laws and constants.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, one of them, through sheer probability, would end up with a configuration like ours, which permits life. You would happen to be in the one where it all worked out, so you are being all amazed by it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys were able to swallow this. So the multiverse theory says its craziest form that there are infinite number of universes with their own little numbers and ratios. And guess what? If there are infinite universes, one of them will have the configuration we do. So it's only through probability that there's going to be a universe where there's right gravity, right amount of electromagnetism, and one of them will happen to match the profile of ours, and life would arise. What's the big deal, buddy? Why are you like bringing God and designer into everything and getting all like chills and stuff? So there are infinite number of universes. Problem solved. You guys, the multiverse is God's surrogate. It's their substitute of God. Just invoke a gazillion universes. That's what string theory is, by the way. They say there are 10 to the power of 500 universes out there. Well, one of them would have the configuration and setup we do. So life would have to arise. You happen to be in the one where it worked out. So you look at nature and they're like, wow, it's so nice to me. Universe loves us. That's the response that they give. They invoke the multiverse. Interesting. How do we respond to this? Well, first of all, to avoid God, you're willing to believe in an infinite amount of universes that we can't even observe. I mean, that takes more faith to believe than an intelligent designer, wouldn't you say? Well, that's the first thing. Secondly, multiverse has no observational evidence. Just some theoretical models with no physical verification. That goes against your principle. Remember, science, physical verification is the only way to the truth. Now you're conveniently willing to retire that just so you can weasel your way out of the intelligent design. Okay, so that's another problem. Here's the third one. I should say thirdly, what's generating all of these infinite number of universes with their own sets of laws and constant? What is this universe generating mechanism that's spitting out these bubble universes with their own laws and their own ratios? That has got to be a very profound, powerful entity. What is that? No response. Once again, the origin problems are fraught in naturalism. And of course, one of my favorite responses, Occam Razor's law states that simplest explanations are the default. Explanations shouldn't be complicated or multiplied unnecessarily, and multiverse does that to the most extravagant degree. I mean, look at this. Unreal what you will posit just so you can weasel your way out of it. So now that you got them cornered, this is where they move on to the second objection. Can I just quickly get through it? Those of you who need to drop out, please do, but I'm really trying to not leave it at a spot where if I were to resume now, I have to give you a lot of background again. We're in the flow, let's just get one more objection done. So this is where they move on to the second objection, and that is argument from poor design. Go ahead, Sister Nusa. This one is this one gets Muslims a lot if they're not fully educated and they're not trained in thinking properly. Go ahead.
If an intelligent design is behind the cosmos and nature, then how can we conceive flaws in nature? How can we observe things that are poorly designed? How come the human eye has photosensitive cells in the back of the retina and nerve wiring in the front? How come majority of the universe is inefficient with dark energy and seems uninhabitable? How come there is junk in DNA?
Hopefully you guys have heard of junk DNA, that 95% of the DNA is basically useless. So he's like, okay, fine. If there's an intelligent designer, like you claim there is, then how come things are poorly designed in nature? How do you explain that, buddy? There's an intelligent designer that's basically pulling the strings behind the scene. So, how do we respond to that, folks? Here we go. There are two responses that your guidebook gives you. The first is our response from intention and qualification. Here we go. The response goes like this. In order to conclude something is poorly designed, you have to first know the intent of the designer and have the qualifications of the designer. What do I mean by this? What we mean by intent is without knowing the intent, something can be easily chalked up to a poor design. So let me give you the Tesla example. If someone tried to put gas in Tesla, and now the gas where you're supposed to charge the battery, you put gas in there, they have no idea it's an electrical vehicle. They don't know that the intent behind it is to run on electricity, not gas. And they try to put gas in it, and now it doesn't work, and it basically malfunctions. They're like, what a poorly designed car. It sucks. It doesn't even do what a Corolla can do, and I paid $70,000 for a Tesla. Poorly designed. No, it's not poorly designed. You just don't know the intent. So similarly, the eye example they gave, maybe you don't understand the intent of the designer behind putting the wiring in the front and photocells in the back. Similarly, I mean, if you're gonna, they say if you're gonna judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, obviously you're gonna conclude it to be a failure. Well, you need to know the intent. That's the first thing. Here's the second one, qualification. Do you have the knowledge and the expertise of the designer? Because sometimes people with deep expertise will often do things that will seem counterintuitive to the rookies. I like to give the example of when a car is just 1 inch off the ground. So if you've looked at the really fancy cars, they're like literally 2 inches off the ground. Now imagine if you don't know much about cars and you don't have the knowledge and the expertise of how cars are made, and you're driving on the roads of Palestine or Pakistan, for whatever, not to throw one country under the bus. And next thing you know, because the car is just 1 inch or 2 inches off the ground, the road bumps are basically every 2 seconds and the car is getting damaged, and you're like, oh my goodness, what a poorly designed car. It's just 1 inch off the ground. Why would you do that? Everything underneath is getting damaged. And then you zoom out and you're like, you're the idiot, because this car was designed for a racetrack. And you need a low car for lower center of gravity so it can do his job. You guys, same thing here. If you don't know the intent of the designer, and you're not at the level of the designer, then on what grounds are you judging it to be a poor design? So first thing we need to understand, and you see this with naturalists a lot, this arrogance, as if they have full understanding of everything, and now they can judge something to be poor or efficient. We can't even recreate one cell in a lab. I don't know if you guys know this. We can't bring organelles and mitochondria and different things and turn a cell on. So then, if we are not at the level of whatever this designing mechanism is, we don't know the intent, then you're not in a position to judge. Here's a second response. And this is basically the response from confirmation bias and laziness. So I'm going to just quickly read it off to you guys so you guys understand what we mean by this here. As a naturalist, we're talking to John here, you hold that nothing is intentionally designed. Everything is a product of mindless forces and chance. So it's easy to conclude on your worldview that something is flawed and junk. That actually stops scientific progress. A more rational view would be to acknowledge that things in nature have intricacy and complexity far beyond our abilities. Just look at one cell. So it'd be safer, don't you think, to have intellectual humility and conclude that perhaps it is my understanding that is flawed, not that design in nature is flawed. Maybe I haven't gotten there yet to appreciate the expertise in something. So John the atheist comes back at us and he's like, can you give me an example where this mindset would be fruitful? Absolutely. Let me give you an example that you used. The junk DNA. I don't know if you all know this. This is a phenomenal example, and we'll end on this. In the late 20th century, most scientists believed that 95% of human DNA was junk without any function. That was justified, quite conveniently, as leftovers of the blind evolutionary process. And now what's happening? In the early 2000s, when finally this view was challenged due to the ENCODE project, where literally 400 scientists are now learning that pretty much all of DNA is serving some function. And it is an intricate interplay of gene regulatory networks that brings about so many functions that you and I experience. Now we're learning about the human eye. Remember that they were criticizing? That the wiring that they were criticizing as being in the front, these are called the Mueller cells, which take specific wavelengths of light to specific photosensitive cells in the back, giving you the ultra crisp HD vision that you and I enjoy, and the clarity that you and I enjoy at night is because what Allah has done, He has put the nerve wiring at the front. So they detect specific light, like a blue light and the red light, and they take it to a very specialized cell. So each cell specializes in a certain type of light. So that's why the wiring has to be at the front. And now, alhamdulillah, because of it, what was deemed as a poor design is now deemed as a marvelous design. So the response in summary is, what gives you the credentials to call something poor? Do you understand the intent? Do you have the expertise? And science, remember, we can always throw that in there. Science gives you probable knowledge. So you may think something is poor now, like you did with the DNA, you called it junk, and then 10 years from now, you're like, oh, sorry, we got to take that back. It does serve a lot of functions. We weren't just there yet. Yet you were there in your arrogance to call something poor. history of science taught us something, that not to be so definitive about your views, that you may grow in your understanding of something? So, these are the two objections, alhamdulillah, that we were able to get through. I apologize for going overboard. I'm really struggling to condense material. You guys don't know the hours that go into condensing this stuff, but still it spills over because justice has to be done to this content. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it gives you clarity and it gives you certainty. Let me go back to the previous slide as requested. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I will definitely send these slides over, especially the last few. We went rather fast. So inshallah, you'll have them for your reference. And inshallah, you'll be able to get those notes. Here we go. All right. If there are questions, let me know. Going once, going twice, and then going thrice. All right, folks, alhamdulillah, with this, we conclude our fourth session. Inshallah, with this in mind, we will be able to move on to the next part of our guidebook next time around. Thank you so much for your patience and having that intellectual stamina. May Allah bless you, increase you. And I will stop the recording right here. I know some of you are still taking notes. Subhanallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Here we go.